Neil Gaiman reflects on how his late friend Terry Pratchett has transformed in public memory. 8 years after his passing, the sharp-witted, occasionally cantankerous writer has been polished into a kind of saintly figure, all twinkling wisdom and universal approval. The real Terry, though, he'd have scoffed at the idea. The man Gaiman knew was brilliant but far from agreeable, opinionated, stubborn, and unafraid to ruffle feathers. Trust me, whatever your beliefs, Terry held at least one that would have made you wince. Even now, Gaiman finds himself arguing with the version of Terry in his head, especially while working on Good Omens. Sometimes that inner Terry wins, nudging him toward choices the real Pratchett might have made. But what Gaiman misses most are the lost stories, the unpublished fragments, like Rincewiind's Mother's Tale or the scrapped Moving Pictures chapter, all obliterated when Terry's hard drive met a steamroller's wrath. Then came the call. Archivists had dug up forgotten Pratchett tales from old newspapers. Reading them, Gaiman grinned but also wondered, what would Terry think? The answer, of course, depended on which Terry. The young, hungry writer thrilled. The later, more critical version, harder to say. People, after all, are messy, even legends. And if you think that's complicated, just wait until you hear about the time Terry tried to explain quantum physics using nothing but a cheese sandwich and a very confused badger. But that's a story for another day. He once described journalism to me like a smash-and-grab heist: burst through the front window, snatch whatever catches your eye, then vanish before anyone notices. That's exactly how these stories feel: tight, fast, and ruthlessly efficient. Every word counts, every sentence pulls you forward. This isn't the Terry Pratchett of biting satire or absurdist wit, not yet. Back then, he was a journalist convinced, deep down, that he was really a sci-fi writer, even if his byline said otherwise. When we first met, he introduced himself that way, and honestly, I bought it. These were the years of The Dark Side of the Sun and Strata, where he cobbled together influences from Asimov and Niven, building worlds from scratch but still figuring out what to do with them. The stories in this collection, they're grounded in something closer to reality, or at least a reality where the absurd leaks in at the edges. Funny, fantastical, they feel like the rough sketches of what would later become Discworld, or even the chaos of Good Omens. Growing up as a writer in public isn't easy. Terry didn't have the luxury of endless drafts in a drawer. He needed to publish, to learn on the job. Writing under pseudonyms like Patrick Kearns gave him room to experiment, to figure out what kind of stories he actually liked telling. These 20 tales are his training ground. Some borrow from Roy Lewis, the evolution man, playing with cavemen as stand-ins for modern humanity. Others, like the Blackberry stories, have that distinct British humor, playful for kids but laced with sly jokes for adults, the kind Norman Hunter perfected with Professor Brainstorm. And in every line you can see him becoming Terry Pratchett. The turns of phrase, the names, the flashes of brilliance, it's all there, just waiting to fully take shape. The quest for the keys might as well be a lost Discworld prototype. Swap a few details and it could have been the blueprint for the color of magic. Funny thing is, I bet the Terry of later years would have cringed a little at these early works being dug up. But that's the beauty of it, watching a writer find his voice. One wild, messy story at a time. The Patrick Kearns tales might have seemed like a quirky detour in Terry Pratchett's legendary career. But what would the late, great Sir Terry himself have thought about these rediscovered gems? My guess: he'd have grinned at the idea of fans stumbling upon them, though I suspect he'd have rolled his eyes at the notion of Pratchett scholars dissecting his early work. Let's be honest, he probably found the whole concept of academic analysis a bit ridiculous. Still, I imagine he'd have felt a quiet pride in the young journalist who penned those stories. Rereading them decades later, he might have cracked a smile at his own youthful wit. buried under that unbreakable pen name and tucked away in the forgotten archives of the Western daily press. Back then, young Terry likely assumed they'd stay lost forever, but here they are, proving him delightfully wrong. Neil Gaiman made 2023 introduction by Colin Smythe for years. I wondered why Terry's early short fiction seemed to vanish during parts of the 1970s. Turns out, I just wasn't looking hard enough. While crafting The Dark Side of the Sun, Strata, and The Color of Magic, he was also secretly churning out stories for the Western daily press, first under a pseudonym, then later under his real name. Enter Patrick Kearns, a name close enough to Pratchett to raise eyebrows and borrowed from his mother's side. Who else would have sprinkled in places like Gritcher and Blackberry or dreamed up the Ministry of Nuisances? And let's not ignore the Blackberry Institute of Applied Nonsense, suspiciously similar to Discworld's Unseen University, don't you think? Back then, newspaper ethics probably kept him from double-dipping under his own name, especially while working for the Bath and West Evening Chronicle. But these stories, pure Pratchett. If not for Chris Lawrence, who saved clippings from the Western daily press, we'd never have known about The Quest for the Keys, 1984, until recently. And when superfans Pat and Jan Harkin dug through old archives in Yorkshire, they struck gold, unearthing the Kearns tales along the way. Funny thing, Terry never once helped me track down his early work. As he joked in Dragons at Crumbling Castle, some stories were carefully hidden away and very deliberately forgot all about. Turns out, he wasn't kidding. Neither Rob Wilkins nor I had a clue these existed. But now, it's a joy to finally share these lost pieces of Terry's imagination. Colin Smythe, how it all began. From the very beginning, the older cavemen were skeptical. "This goes against nature," they grumbled, shaking their heads. "What's next? Where does it stop?" But the younger ones just rolled their eyes and tossed another log into the flickering glow. "Relax, old-timers, this is the future." Og, the cave's resident tinkerer, had dragged the strange thing back from the woods, calling it fire. He claimed it had been devouring a tree when he found it. Now it lived in a ring of stones, crackling and hissing like some wild creature. "It keeps you warm," Og insisted, a welcome change from the bone-chilling dampness of cave life. Hal, the cautious chief, eyed it warily. "You sure this won't backfire like your last brilliant idea?" he muttered, rubbing his ribs where a spear. Og called it an innovation. Hal called it a painful miscalculation, had once left a bruise. Og waved him off. "Totally safe, starve it and it dies. Simple." That night the tribe huddled around the fire, gnawing on cold mammoth while unseen beasts rumbled in the darkness. Og rambled about fire's endless uses, but Hal just chewed thoughtfully, until he absent-mindedly reached out and yelped as the flames nipped his fingers. "Told you it bites," Og said with a shrug. Hal stormed off, muttering about stupid hot rocks. Soon fire became routine. The women tended it while the men hunted. Then disaster or genius struck. Og dropped a hunk of wild boar into the flames, and suddenly the cave smelled incredible. Cookery was born. Even Hal couldn't argue with roasted mammoth or honey-glazed boar, though the nightshade soup incident was regrettable. "Mistakes happen," Og chirped, scraping charred toadstools off his dinner. There was no slowing him down. Charcoal scribbles became art. A wolf pup became a pet. But then grapes, forgotten in water, fermented. Wine. By the time the hunting party returned, minus Hal, still stubbornly chasing a giraffe, the cave was a scene of cheerful chaos, until Hal smelled smoke. Not the cozy, contained kind, the oh-no kind. He sprinted back, lungs burning, to find the hillside ablaze. Inside, the tribe snored peacefully, oblivious. "Wake up!" Hal bellowed, yanking them to their feet. "The fire's out there, and it's winning." As flames swallowed the grassland, they fled to the river, coughing and cursing, while Og, somewhere in the smoke, probably grinned. Progress indeed. The group stumbled through the marsh grass, their sobs mixing with the rustling reeds. Hal's face flushed crimson as he whirled on Og, his fists clenched. "That's the last straw," he snarled. "Every time you open your eyes, disaster follows. I've put up with your nonsense long enough. Get out." Og shuffled away without protest, his shoulders hunched. Ugg, the eldest among them, scratched his grizzled chin. "You sure about this? He won't last a day alone," Hal scoffed. "And what about us? Thanks to him, every animal for miles has bolted. At least the fire hasn't reached this part of the river yet. Move out unless you fancy starving to death." For hours they slogged through the scorched earth, dodging smoldering patches and ankle-deep ash. When night fell, a cold drizzle soaked them to the bone. They perched in the skeletal branches of a burned-out tree, listening to the snarls of saber-tooths below. The next day brought more rain, forcing them to cram into a shallow cave. Someone broke the silence. "You know, that fire wasn't all bad." Another voice chimed in, "Yeah, cooked meat. Best thing I ever tasted." Even Ugg sighed, watching the storm-darkened horizon. "Kid had his moments." Hal crossed his arms. "Yeah, right up until he nearly roasted us alive." A howl cut through the night, then another closer. Shadows darted at the edge of the hollow. Hal's heart hammered as a massive wolf lunged forward. "Circle up," he bellowed, grabbing a rock. The ape-men fought back with sticks and stones, but the wolves kept coming, driven mad by hunger. Then whoosh, a flaming branch sailed past, scattering the pack. Og stood at the ridge, notching an arrow into a strange, curved stick. He fired, and the wolves yelped and fled. Without a word, he motioned for them to follow. In a hidden clearing, zebra meat sizzled over a fire. Nearby, a sturdy shelter of woven branches stood waiting. Hal hesitated until the others were already tearing into the meal. "Figured you'd need me," Og said simply. And just like that, the tribe had a home. Og taught them to plant seeds to trap game instead of chasing it. He even cobbled together wings, though that experiment ended with a spectacular crash. But the idea stuck. Soon huts multiplied, fields spread, and hunters like Hal found themselves out of a job. Civilization had arrived. Whether they liked it or not, everything started with Hal sitting outside his small beachside cabin, lost in thought and nursing a quiet sense of unease. He couldn't shake the question. Where is all this leading? Now let's talk about seashells. You've probably heard that if you press one to your ear, you'll catch the whisper of the ocean, sound trapped in those spiraled chambers. But what if the shell isn't just old but ancient? That's exactly what happened in the coastal town of Shingle Regis, where a quirky little museum perched at the end of the pier. Packed with oddities, supposed mermaid jewelry, famous shipwreck relics, and other ocean-tossed curios. It was mostly a tourist trap. The place was run by Horace Breezeforth, a guy who took his odd job way too seriously. One afternoon, while meticulously cataloging the air pockets in a particularly weird piece of seaweed, Horace was interrupted by a young woman slamming a massive fossil onto his desk. "Well, would you look at that," he mused. "A rotunda snail, extinct, rare, and perfect for our collection." The woman introduced herself as Jane Throckmorton, a geology student from Blackberry University. "Found this buried in the cliffs," she said, grinning. "And get this, it still plays the ocean soundtrack." Horace pressed it to his ear, expecting waves. Instead, he heard something far stranger: ancient tides, prehistoric screeches, and what sounded like dinosaurs splashing in shallow water. His jaw dropped. "Oh, just wait," Jane said, her smirk turning serious. "Listen harder." Then came the singing. A jaunty, barely audible tune cutting through the echoes. "Oh, I do like to be beside the seaside." Horace nearly fumbled the fossil. That's impossible. No humans back then." He demanded to see where she dug it up. Soon they were scrambling down a rocky cove just outside town. Jane pointed to the spot where she'd chiseled the shell free. The cliffside was littered with fossils. "We're solving this," Horace muttered, grabbing a spare hammer and getting to work. 20 minutes in, he uncovered something bizarre, not bones, but the fossilized frame of a deck chair. Meanwhile, Jane pried loose a small lizard skeleton, until she noticed the newspaper clenched in its jaws. The rock had flattened it into slate, but the headline was still faintly legible. Horace squinted. The Blackberry Chronicle and West Gritcher Times. His voice faltered. The date is, oh no. New detail: as they worked, a sudden gust of wind sent sand swirling around them, making the fossilized newspaper flutter like it was alive, just for a second. Tone shift, from curious to darkly amused, because, really, what's more ridiculous than a dinosaur-era deck chair? Maybe the fact that Horace was now seriously considering whether ancient beachgoers had gotten eaten by the local wildlife the fossil discovery was fresh, unearthed just that morning. Soon, the shoreline swarmed with people. Police set up barriers around the rocks while Horace, Jane, and a team of researchers from Blackberry University pored over the ancient remains. Skepticism lingered until one professor chipped away at a stone and uncovered a flattened radio, fossilized under layers of rock for millions of years. Well, Horace muttered, either dinosaurs had killer taste in music, or we've got a serious mystery on our hands. Jane smirked. Or maybe someone's been time-traveling for vacation and keeps dropping things. Leaving the baffled scientists behind, they climbed the cliff path to the fields above. The sun blazed, but a salty breeze kept the heat bearable. The only structure in sight was a weathered cottage tucked behind wind-twisted trees. Its garden overflowed with fuchsias and cabbages, while a goat, tied nearby, had grazed a perfect circle in the grass. A few beehives hummed lazily. "Who lives there?" Jane asked. "Dr. Golightly," Horace replied. "World's top lepidopterist, fancy word for butterfly expert." Jane wrinkled her nose. I hate that, feels cruel." "Supposedly, he keeps them alive in giant cages," Horace said. As they passed, they spotted massive wire enclosures behind the house. Just then a butterfly, blue, green, and speckled gold, zipped past, its wingspan rivaling an eagle's. Seconds later, a round little man in a sun hat and shorts came crashing through the bushes, swinging a net the size of a fishing trawler. "Did you see a Golighlius gigantea?" he gasped. Horace pointed toward the ocean. "If you mean that massive butterfly." "Massive," the man scoffed. "That's a hatchling, pardon me, must dash." He vanished back into the foliage. Jane gaped. "Butterflies that size don't exist." "Not anymore," Horace mused. "But millions of years ago, insects were giants. The radio fossil, the singing seashell, it all clicked. They knocked at the cottage, but no one answered. Peeking around back, they spotted more colossal butterflies, some perched like parrots. The next day, the beach buzzed with fresh chaos. Another professor had dug up what looked like a fossilized fishing net. Horace gave the cottage door another knock, only to realize it was already ajar. With a twinge of guilt, he nudged it open and stepped inside, Jane close behind. The dim interior smelled faintly of dust and old wood, with a grandfather clock ticking lazily in the corner. The furniture was worn but inviting, until a persistent buzzing sound caught their attention. It led them to a small cupboard beneath the creaky staircase. When Horace swung the door open, instead of brooms or boxes, he was staring at a sunlit prehistoric beach. Towering ferns swayed in the breeze and jagged cliffs loomed in the distance. He blinked, shut the door, just a cupboard again, then opened it once more. The beach remained. "Well, here goes nothing," he muttered, stepping through. Jane hesitated only a second before joining him. Behind them, the cottage's interior hung in midair like a floating painting. "Feels like we've taken a shortcut to the Jurassic," Horace said, squinting at the enormous butterflies flitting overhead. Jane frowned. "How does this even work?" That cottage didn't even have Wi-Fi. Horace dragged a hefty rock in front of the portal just in case. "Better safe than extinct," he joked, though his voice wavered. They trekked along the shoreline, dodging pterodactyls gliding above. One colossal brontosaurus, bigger than a two-story house, paused its fern-munching to study them curiously. Jane, ever the fearless one, patted its leathery snout. "Don't worry, they're herbivores. Step on its toe and it wouldn't notice till next week." Horace gulped. Good to know. Pushing through a thicket, they nearly tripped over Dr. Golightly, lounging in a deck chair and smacking a vintage radio. Useless thing, he grumbled. All I get is static, not even a decent dinosaur podcast. Horace smirked. Unless you're tuning into the Pterodactyl News Network. The doctor squinted at them. Wait, weren't you two just in my cottage? What brings you to the Mesozoic? Tea. He gestured to a steaming pot on a camp stove. As they sipped from chipped mugs, Horace explained the mysterious cupboard. The doctor shrugged. Happens every other Tuesday. No idea why. Jane's eyes sparkled. Imagine time-traveling vacationers, beach parties with triceratops. Dr. Golightly scoffed. Please, I'm here for the peace and quiet and the butterflies. He adjusted his sunglasses as a distant T-Rex let out a thunderous roar. Mostly the quiet, Doctor. Golightly waved a bulky alarm clock in the air. The portal shuts after 7 hours, he explained. That's why I never let this thing out of my sight. Horace checked his wristwatch, then frowned. Sand must have jammed the gears. It stopped 2 hours ago. They bolted through the ferns just as the shimmering gateway winked out of existence, slicing the rock Horace had lodged in it clean in half. A heavy silence settled over them. Dr. Golightly finally broke it with a shrug. Well, on the bright side, the climate here's pleasant. And I bet we can survive on clams for a couple weeks. That night was miserable, huddled on a boulder while unseen beasts snorted and rustled in the bushes. Jane sniffled for a bit, then gave up and started brainstorming how to prepare shellfish without a stove. Dawn brought relief. They sparked a fire using the doctor's glasses as a magnifier and boiled mussels in his dented teapot. Not terrible, Horace admitted between slurps. After eating, he waded into the shallows, scooping up ancient fish with a butterfly net. Far better than dusting fossils back at the museum, he decided, so much so that he burst into song. Then he froze. A massive, empty conch shell lay at his feet. That was us we heard earlier, he realized. No wonder the voice sounded like me. This is the same shell we found fossilized. He sprinted down the beach, spotting the others just as they disappeared behind a jagged outcrop. When he caught up, they were gaping at a sheltered cove. The heat's playing tricks on us, Dr. Golightly muttered. We're millions of years in the past, right? Then explain that. Tucked against the cliff stood a quaint cottage, roses climbing its walls, a trimmed lawn out front, though the idyllic scene was slightly ruined by a small dinosaur munching the flowers, tied up with twine like a misbehaving goat. A weathered sign creaked above the door, the old red sandstone lion. A pub, Horace blurted. They clambered closer, half expecting it to vanish. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ale and polish. Hoarse brasses gleamed on the walls, tankards dangled from oak beams, and bizarrely, a fire crackled in the hearth despite the sweltering day. A dozing lizard sprawled in front of it. The bartender emerged, bald and beaming in a crimson vest. Morning, he chirped. Lovely weather, so when you lot pop in from? Horace hesitated. 1973, the man's eyebrows shot up. Blimey. Rare to see 20th century visitors, no offense meant, he added hastily. Horace bought lemonades for everyone and launched into their story. Mr. Buncombe, as he introduced himself, leaned in, riveted. New detail. While talking, Horace noticed a framed newspaper clipping behind the bar. Local man invents time-traveling ale. But before he could ask, a distant roar shook the glasses on the shelves. On shift, from frantic survival to bewildered humor, because nothing says prehistoric adventure like a dinosaur tied up like a backyard dog. The man leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. That little glitch you experienced, we call it a side effect, happens when the temporal express rolls through on Tuesdays, tends to leave ripples in time. Jane frowned. The what express? Turned out it was a massive time-traveling train shuttling tourists between the 25th century and prehistoric eras. Apparently vacationing in the distant past was all the rage in the future, hence Mr. Buncombe's quaint inn, the old red sandstone lion. We cater to a refined clientele, he boasted. Though I won't knock the Triassic or Carboniferous periods, perfect if you enjoy sweltering jungles and giant bugs. Horace blinked. Carboni what? Jane rolled her eyes. The coal-forming era genius, millions of years ago. Ring any bells? Bunkum gestured to a faded poster on the wall. A colossal dragonfly darting through a steamy marsh with bold letters screaming, "Witness coal being born. Hunt mega-dragonflies in the Carboniferous heat wave." Fine print at the bottom credited Precambrian Timeways Limited, Est, 2455 ad. Bunkum's expression darkened. Here's the hitch. 20th century folks aren't supposed to know about any of this. Time police might have opinions on letting you return. Could stir up trouble. Horace sputtered, but the fossilized newspaper. People'll dismiss it as a hoax, Bunkum cut in. He snatched up a futuristic phone, dialed a string of numbers, and muttered into the receiver. After a tense pause, he sighed. Time HQ in 2500 says they'll halt the express for you. It's a whistle stop here, but they'll need to wipe your memories. No exceptions. Dr. Golightly perked up. Mind if I stick around? This era's got better butterflies. Bunkum shrugged. Could use a backup bartender. Horace, though, shook his head. The 20th century's a mess, but it's my mess. Jane nodded. Outside, a metallic thud echoed as a sleek silver train shimmered into existence midair. A voice crackled, Jurassic next. Then the Stone Age with stops through 2700. With quick goodbyes, Jane and Horace boarded. A flash of blue light, and suddenly they were sprawled on a seaside cliff, the pier stretching below, sailboats bobbing in the harbor. Horace groaned. Why do I feel like I forgot something important? Jane squinted at the horizon. Yeah, like we should remember but don't. New detail. The futuristic phone emits a faint holographic display when Bunkum dials. Tone shift. Bunkum's initial sales pitch turns ominous when discussing time police, adding tension. Ever heard of a pub called, what was it again? The name escapes me. Let's grab lunch and see if it comes back to us, Horace suggested, offering Jane a hand. A few months later, they tied the knot and settled into their happily ever after, except for one bizarre mystery. A postcard arrived out of nowhere, featuring what had to be a doctored photo of dinosaurs casually munching on grass. The stamp was just as strange, a bold blue T with a postmark reading Jurassic Post Office. The message, having a blast. Forecast says clear skies for the next 2 million years. Wish you were here. They never figured out who sent it. The real Wild West sheep rodeo season had turned the border town of Lanagi into pure chaos. The streets were packed with woolly sheep, burly farmers, and sneaky little herding dogs darting between legs. The two local pubs, the Three Feathers on the Welsh side and the Hearts of Oak across the street, were packed, and more than a few windows had already met their fate. The usual rowdiness was cranked up thanks to the 1871 coal rush, flooding the town with grizzled prospectors eager to stake claims, and then claim their stakes, since dinner hour had rolled around. Pianos clanged, dogs yapped, fists flew, and the whole town geared up for a night of pure, unfiltered madness. The racket was so loud that Owen Jones, dozing in the back of the Lanagi post office and sweet shop, nearly missed the Morse code message clicking in from Hereford. Good grief. He yelped, scrambling to jot it down before hobbling straight to the Three Feathers. The bar was thick with smoke and louder than a stampede. Big Di here, Jones shouted. A mountain of a man with a beard like a storm cloud glanced up from his dominoes, where a few extra tiles conveniently slipped from his sleeve. Take a look at this, Jones said, shoving the message at him. Big Di, notorious sheep thief and all-around menace, read it aloud. P.C. McDougal arrives tonight. Lanagi has gone too far. This lawlessness ends now. Chief Constable, Hereford, he laughed so hard he toppled off his chair. The whole bar joined in because when Big Di laughed, you laughed, or else. If we don't run this copper out of town in a week, Di wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes, then Lanagi's lost its touch, and I'll be hanging his helmet over my fireplace. An hour later, a lone figure in a crisp blue uniform pedaled down High Street on his regulation police bike. "Doesn't look like much, does he?" Di muttered, leaning against the pub's wall. "Still wet behind the ears," sneered Dylan Morgan, the infamous lone crofter. Somewhere in the distance, a sheep bleated. As if it knew the real showdown was just beginning, Officer Hamish MacDougall, fresh out of the police academy, propped his bicycle against the crumbling brick wall of the abandoned station. Lanagi had a reputation for chewing up law enforcement. Big Di and his crew made sure of that. Inside, the place looked like a barn more than a precinct, with dust coating every surface and a flock of sheep milling about. A scrawny old man with wild sideburns and an oversized hat snored loudly in one of the cells. Before Hamish could speak, sharp teeth clamped onto his uniform pants, locking onto his leg like a bear trap. "Ah, there's the new copper." "Heh. Easy, Sandy. She's got a thing for strangers." The whiskered man chuckled, waking up. Hamish glanced down to see a shaggy, battle-scarred sheepdog slinking back under the cot. The man stood, offering a grimy handshake. "Name's Crabapple Evans, sort of the unofficial caretaker round here since the last officer quit." Hamish wiped dust off a bench and sat. "All right, fill me in on Lanagi." "Boy, you're in for it," Crabapple cackled. "Daffodil smuggling, poaching, brawls at the mines. They've run off 27 cops this year alone." He grabbed a massive harp off the wall. "Pardon me, gotta practice for the bardic contest. My advice: head to the Three Feathers, introduce yourself. Heh heh." As Hamish walked down the street, Crabapple's off-key singing followed him. "Don't leave me, Blodwin Morgan, not on our wedding day." Inside the pub, the clock was frozen at 9:10, had been for a decade and a half. Technically, it was past closing, but Big Di and the lone crofter were busy hustling a pair of out-of-towners in darts, thanks to some special equipment. The crofter leaned in, whispering, "Word is the London coal train's common tomorrow, full of premium coal and the owner's gold reserves." Big Di stroked his chin. "Now wouldn't that be a shame if something happened to it?" Just then Hamish stepped inside, clearing his throat. "Evening, gentlemen, bit late for business, isn't it?" The bartender shrugged. Big Di dictated closing time, not the law. To everyone's shock, Big Di just grinned. "Right you are, officer." "Last call, lads, wouldn't want to disrespect the law." Hamish puffed up slightly. "Good, let's keep it that way." New detail: as he left, Hamish noticed a faded wanted poster, his own face crudely drawn, already pinned behind the bar. As they stepped out of the bar, the lone crofter shot Di a sideways glance. "Why didn't you knock some sense into him back there?" he muttered. Di shook his head, keeping his voice low. "Not now. We can't risk drawing attention before tomorrow's job. Gather the crew, we'll settle scores after the train heist." Meanwhile, old Crabapple was crouched near the railroad tracks outside Lanagi, hunting rabbits he had no business hunting. He moved like a shadow, careful not to make a sound, until a rustling in the underbrush made him freeze. Through the leaves, he spotted Big Di's gang stacking railroad ties across the tracks. His heart hammered as the lone crofter loomed just feet away. Then, snap! A twig broke under Crabapple's hand. "Who's there?" Crofter snarled, whirling around. Crabapple's mouth moved faster than his brain. "Just us rabbits," he blurted, instantly regretting it. He bolted, the crofter hot on his heels, until Sandy, Crabapple's scrappy terrier, lunged from the bushes and sank his teeth into the man's leg. A string of curses followed Crabapple as he sprinted toward town. He burst into the police station, gasping for breath. PC MacDougall barely had time to set down his tea. They, Crabapple wheezed. "Spit it out, man." "They're gonna wreck the express." MacDougall shot up, snatching his helmet. Outside, they found his bike stripped clean, no wheels, just a frame. "Di's crew's at the tracks now," Crabapple panted. MacDougall checked the clock. "Train's due any minute. Anyone else got a bike?" Crabapple hesitated. "Well, there's my old bone shaker out back." And what a relic it was, a rusted penny farthing with tires like petrified wood. They careened down the street, Crabapple pedaling like a madman, MacDougal clinging to his suspenders and Sandy yapping behind them. "There's a spot to flag the train," Crabapple shouted, "but brace yourself, this hill's a killer." The train whistles screamed as they crested the slope. Below, the express snaked through the valley. Gravity took over. The world blurred. Sandy gave up, panting in the distance. The wheels became a hummingbird's wings, the axles glowing like embers. "Use the brakes," MacDougal bellowed over the wind. "Brakes? What's that?" Crabapple howled back, voice cracking as smoke billowed from the hubs. Inside the train, Sir Humphrey Clinker lowered his newspaper, squinting at the spectacle outside his window. A wild-eyed old man on an antique bicycle, belting out Welsh hymns while a frazzled cop smacked flaming spokes with his helmet. "Fascinating," Sir Humphrey mused, turning a page. "Country air does wonders for the locals." The officer glanced up, his mind suddenly made. In one swift motion, he vaulted off his motorcycle and clung to the side of the rocking train car. He hauled himself through the open window, breathless, and demanded, "Where's the emergency brake? This is official police business." Sir Humphrey, ever the proper gentleman, raised an eyebrow. Now, my good man, you can't just yank that cord willy-nilly. There's a hefty fine involved, £5 to be precise." Hamish wasn't having it. "This is an emergency," he barked. With a theatrical flourish, Sir Humphrey stood. "Well then, allow me to fulfill a childhood fantasy," he declared, yanking the cord with relish. The train screeched to a halt just feet from Big Di's makeshift blockade. "Good heavens," Sir Humphrey mused, grinning. "Had I known stopping a train was this thrilling, I'd have risked the fine ages ago." Hamish bolted down the aisle, tackling Big Di as the brute tried to escape into the baggage car. But the lone crofter and his crew were waiting. "Tie him up," Big Di roared, only for his men to freeze, eyes wide. A monstrous plume of smoke and fire barreled down the tracks, a soot-covered figure at its center, bellowing something unintelligible. Then boom! Crabapple's bike hit a rock and exploded, showering the scene in sparks and shrapnel. Seizing the chaos, Hamish flipped Big Di into a textbook police takedown. A rogue wheel clobbered the lone crofter, while P.C. MacDougal began his usual spiel. "I have reason to believe." Thud. Crabapple crash-landed onto two thugs. "That you can assist," snarl. Sandy the dog tripped another goon. "With my inquiries," MacDougal finished smoothly. With Crabapple freshly deputized, they cuffed the dazed gang and hauled them off to Lanagi jail. That night the town was eerily quiet. Hamish leaned against the station door, listening to Crabapple's off-key rendition of "Hang Down Your Head, Big Di." "Yep," Hamish sighed. "Peace at last." It lasted 3 days. Lanagi wasn't the type of place to stay quiet for long. How Scrooge met a very unconvincing ghost and wasn't impressed. "Ooh, ooh," groaned Marley's ghost, rattling his chains with all the menace of a rusty shopping cart. Scrooge squinted into the darkness. "Wah, who's there?" he grumbled, yanking the blankets tighter. "It's me, Ebenezer, Jacob Marley, your dearly departed business partner who totally didn't take a nosedive off a skyscraper, ahem." The specter floated there, weighed down by ghostly chains and an ancient glowing calculator shackled to its ankle. "Anyway," Marley continued, "I'm here to show you the error of your, wait, is this walnut paneling. Nice digs, Scrooge. You've really moved up in the world." Scrooge flicked on the lamp. Scrooge's bedroom was a lavish display of wealth, walls draped in imported silk, his bed covered in luxurious ermine. Instead of the usual nightshirt, he sported sleek black martial art-style pajamas that wouldn't look out of place in a spy movie. When Marley's ghost appeared, Scrooge barely flinched. "Ah, Marley, my old partner, the one who took an unexpected dive off a skyscraper before I could stop him. Cough, cough. So how's the afterlife treating you?" Marley blinked, caught off guard. Could be worse," he muttered. Scrooge swung his legs out of bed, slipping into a robe embroidered with gold thread. "All right, let's cut to the chase. This is your second haunting, isn't it? Last time you rattled those chains like a one-man horror show. I'll admit it left an impression. Dickens really ran with it, didn't he? Marley opened his mouth to speak, but Scrooge was already rummaging through a mahogany liquor cabinet. Used to despise Christmas, you know, whiskey, or do ghosts have a no-spirits policy? Ha! Anyway, thanks to you I saw the light. Enough, Marley groaned, letting out a sharp whistle. With a pop, another specter materialized, this one grinning broadly, clutching a glowing book and speaking into a mic like a late-night talk show host. Scrooge recoiled. Sweet mercy, it's Eamon O'Fizzy. Right you are, Ebenezer, the spirit chimed in an exaggerated Irish brogue. Recognize this voice, begorra, Scrooge rolled his eyes. Yeah, that's your voice. No, this voice, O'Fizzy snapped. A tiny, frail voice piped up. God bless us, every one. Scrooge clutched his chest in mock shock. No, it can't be. Good grief, it is. Tiny Tim. Bingo, O'Fizzy said. Now let's rewind. Suddenly, Scrooge was staring at a ghostly projection of the Cratchit family, gathered joyfully around their modest dinner table. Ah yes, the happy ending after my grand redemption, spreading holiday cheer like a philanthropist on a sugar rush. And then, O'Fizzy added, you monopolized Christmas crackers, turkeys, tinsel factories, even those creepy plastic Santas for supermarket cakes. Exactly, Scrooge beamed. Merged it all into one glorious empire, Uniscrooge. O'Fizzy vanished in a burst of neon lights, only for a new nightmare to materialize. Scrooge stumbled back, gripping the curtains. It's, he stammered, staring up at a looming figure with an unnervingly massive chin. Evening, old bean, boomed the Bruce forsooth spectre. Ready for the next chapter? Splendid. The vision shifted to store shelves overflowing with Uniscrooge merchandise. Overpriced soap wrapped in enough festive paper to bankrupt a small country. Scrooge's eyes gleamed. Genius packaging, markups 1,000%. The holiday chaos was in full swing. Department stores packed with frustrated parents, kids throwing tantrums, and exhausted moms threatening punishments that would make any child think twice. The shelves were stocked with cheap plastic toys in overpriced boxes, stale cigars, and novelty corkscrews that no one actually needed. Outside, reckless partygoers stumbled into their cars after one too many eggnogs, turning the streets into a bumper car nightmare. On TV, reruns of Disney classics played on loop, the same scenes recycled for the 100th time. The screen flickered to the Cratchit family, sprawled miserably in front of their bulky television, looking anything but festive. A group of overly enthusiastic hosts in flimsy paper hats tried and failed to drum up holiday cheer under harsh studio lights. Bob Cratchit groaned, rubbing his stomach. Remember when Christmas was actually fun, Mrs. C. Now it's just one long headache. I swear this is the last year I'm putting up with this nonsense. The broadcast cut out abruptly, replaced by something far worse, a grotesque, grinning face that sent Scrooge scrambling back in horror. No, not the Hughie grin, he shrieked. The eerie figure chuckled, flashing a row of unnervingly white teeth. Give it up for Bruce forsooth, folks. Wasn't he a riot? Now let's take a peek at what the future holds. A bleak montage flashed by empty shops, deserted streets, a world that had given up on Christmas entirely. The scene dissolved awkwardly as if even the vision itself was embarrassed. What happened? Scrooge stammered. The Hughie grin shrugged. People got sick of it. Too much of a good thing, I suppose. The next morning, Scrooge threw open his curtains, taking in the half-hearted holiday decorations shopkeepers had slapped up just to avoid small talk. Spotting a scrappy kid loitering below, he grinned. Time for a fresh start. Hey, kid, he barked. $5 if you run over to the Cratchits and smash their TV. Another $5 if you make it look like an accident. Slamming the window shut, he chuckled to himself. Humbug, he muttered, feeling oddly satisfied. Meanwhile, in a cozy but cluttered living room, Santa Claus tossed his iconic red hat onto a hook and flopped into his favorite chair, nudging the grumpy house cat off his lap. Mrs. Claus stood in the kitchen doorway, whisking a bowl of batter with enough force to suggest she was imagining someone's face in it. "Oh, really?" she snapped. "And what's the grand reason this time?" Santa sighed, flipping open a newspaper. "5 centuries of delivering presents, and what do I have? No retirement plan, no career growth. Just ho, ho, ho until I drop, I'm done." Before he could even skim the headlines, Mrs. Klaus snatched the paper away. "We'll see about that," she muttered. Mrs. Christmas crossed her arms, giving her husband that no-nonsense look. "You're getting another job, and that's final." "But darling," Santa protested weakly, "I was thinking a little vacation might, with reindeer feed costing what it does." She yanked him up by the suspenders, slapped his hat onto his snowy curls, and shoved him toward the door. "Out you go, mister. No paycheck, no cookies. If you think I'm letting you loaf around here all day, you've got another thing coming." So, with a heavy sigh, Santa trudged down to the job center, where a fresh-faced recruiter blinked in surprise at the jolly, white-bearded man who listed his skills as independent toy manufacturer and nationwide delivery specialist. The recruiter scratched his head but tried to help. "If you're looking for stability, we've got an opening at the bank down the street." "Fantastic," Santa beamed. The next day, however, the recruiter was on the phone with a furious bank manager while Santa sat there, fiddling with his mittens. "A complete madman," the manager screeched through the receiver. "He handed out nearly $5,000 in cash before we caught on, even gave away the pens and desk toys. And that ridiculous outfit, ho ho ho, my foot." Hanging up, the recruiter sighed. "Well, that didn't go well. Pretty sure the Treasury Secretary's job is safe." Santa shrugged. "Just my giving spirit, I suppose." The recruiter, feeling a little sorry for him, flipped through his files again. "Ever driven a big rig?" Santa thought about his sleigh, groaning under the weight of presents every December. "Oh yes, very heavy loads." The next afternoon, the recruiter was back on the phone, this time with a trucking company boss who was yelling so loud the windows rattled. When he finally hung up, he gave Santa a deadpan stare. "Care to explain how you parked a 30-ton semi on a 3-story roof?" Santa blinked. "Isn't that standard? I always land on rooftops." The recruiter pinched the bridge of his nose. "Maybe try dressing less festively," Santa gasped, clutching his red coat. "What's wrong with fur-trimmed trousers and a jolly hat? Never had complaints before." "Fine, one last shot. The toy factory needs holiday help. Surely you can't botch that." But when the phone rang again, the recruiter's enthusiasm had vanished. He groaned, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, you botched it." Father Christmas frowned, rubbing his beard. "Honestly, I never enjoyed crafting those toy soldiers and guns. Just feels wrong, you know." The recruiter at the job center sighed, tapping his pen. "Look, Mr. Christmas, teddy bears and Noah's Arks, that's kid stuff. No offense, but in this market you're what we'd call not exactly a top pick." Just as Father Christmas turned to leave, the phone rang. The recruiter's eyebrows shot up as he listened. Portly, cheerful, great at booming laughs. "Yeah, I might have someone perfect." Hanging up, he grinned. "How'd you feel about working at Macy's? Holiday gig, big red chair, kids lining up to whisper wishes in your ear." Back home, Father Christmas kicked off his boots, humming. "So," Mrs. Christmas asked, stirring a pot of stew. "They loved me," he chuckled. "Sat in this glittery fake grotto, kids climbing onto my lap, no clue why they trust a stranger in a red suit, but hey, free lunch and extra tea breaks." She smirked, setting a steaming plate in front of him. "Bet they adored the suit I stitched for weeks. Oddly, the manager gave me a bonus for it," he mused. "Everyone keeps calling me Father Christmas like it's my real name. Still don't get the big deal." Mrs. Christmas ruffled his snowy hair. "Maybe you're just magic." Meanwhile, in Collapsant Pancras, Postmaster Higgins gaped at an enormous, squirming package. "Albert, you've got to deliver this. It's a partridge in a pear tree." Albert Button groaned. "You're joking." A disgruntled screech from the box proved otherwise. Grumbling, he strapped it to his bike and pedaled uphill, where a stunning woman answered the door, slipping him a crisp 20. Next day, a crate of cooing turtle doves, then 3 French hens, barace, wine, and an accordion solo included. By day 4, Albert was wheezing under the weight of 4 shrieking birds. Her true love bet her tip well, he muttered. Day 5, easy. 5 golden rings. The woman's smile made Albert forget his aching legs, until he remembered. 6 more days of this madness. Albert didn't even blink when 6 geese decided his mailbag was the perfect spot to lay their eggs the next morning. He was more cautious with the 7 swans. Those things could take a man out with one wrong move. Their wings are like baseball bats, he muttered. By the 8th day, he faced a new challenge: 8 maids with milk pails. "Ladies, my bike's not a clown car," he said, scratching his head. "One at a time, okay." His ears turned pink as he helped the first one onto the crossbar. By the 9th day, Albert had embraced the chaos. "All right, drummers, let's get this parade moving," he shouted, eyeing the group covered in stamps like walking postage. 1, 2, wait, no, your left foot. The 10th day was a spectacle, him leading the charge on his bike while 10 bagpipers blasted Scotland the Brave behind him. Then came the 11th day, where he found himself twirling up the hill with 11 dancers, one of whom left a lipstick smudge on his cheek. But disaster struck on the 12th day. "They're gone," the postmaster announced flatly. 12 lords, poof, vanished. Albert's jaw dropped. "How do you lose a dozen leaping nobles?" The postmaster shrugged. "Railways searching. Found a confused baron in a mailbox near Albany, but he wasn't ours." Panicked, Albert tore through the post office with the other mail carriers, flipping parcels like a madman. Not a single duke or viscount in sight. Desperate, he eyed his coworkers, 6 postmen plus the phone crew. "Gentlemen," he declared, "we're improvising. Who's got a costume shop on speed dial?" That afternoon, the young lady peered out her window to see a trampoline and 12 very enthusiastic, very unlordly men bouncing for dear life. "We're aristocracy." Albert yelled mid-backflip, his borrowed crown slipping over one eye. She laughed, clapping as they somersaulted past. The next day she married her sweetheart, with Albert as best man, gold rings in hand and that stubborn coronet still wedged on his head. "Told you we'd deliver," he whispered. Grinning, the woolly hat barely fit over his head, but he didn't care. His grin stretched from ear to ear. The modern Santa inside the bustling North Pole toy factory. Negotiations between Santa and the union reps had reached a boiling point. "Not happening," Santa said firmly, crossing his arms. Sean O'Haircut, the gnome union boss, scowled. "Final answer," he snapped. When Santa nodded, Sean stormed out, slapping a bright red strike notice on the workshop bulletin board. Due to failed negotiations between management, Santa Claus, and the combined unions, Jelpa Gnomes, Elves, Leprechauns, and Pixies Alliance, Renrosp Reindeer and Sleigh Pullers Union, and UFDA's United Fat Jolly Snowmen, all operations are halted effective immediately. Signed, Sean O'Haircut, Union Rep. P.S. Scabs get turned into toads. No exceptions. Machines ground to a halt. Elves abandoned their workbenches, clocking out under the enchanted cuckoo clock. Santa slumped in his chair, head in his hands, when Jack Frost blew in, trailing icy mist. "Rough day," Jack quipped. "Christmas is off," Santa groaned. "The reindeer refuse to fly, the gnomes want better benefits, it's a mess," Jack smirked. "Blame Rudolph. That guy's always stirring drama with his glowing schnoz." A phone rang, BBC, then another. Santa sighed through most of the calls. "Some TV producer wants me on a talk show with Sean and Rackwell Welch." He shot Jack a puzzled look. "Oddly charming fellow. Sounded like your long-lost cousin." News of the canceled holiday spread like wildfire. Trees were stripped of ornaments, networks scrambled for replacement programming, and kids worldwide sobbed into their pillows. Even Jack's perfect blizzard, flawless, powdery white, felt wasted without cheery snowmen or chirping robins, all picketing outside. Santa's news at 10 appearance was grim. Between rising costs and union demands, I'm out of options, he muttered. Meanwhile, Sean hijacked Panorama, turning the host into a squawking macaw. Santa chuckled from his armchair. Maybe it's time to retire, he mused. 4 centuries past due, honestly. New detail. A rogue elf starts a viral TikTok trend, Save Christmas, complicating negotiations further. On shift. From despair to dark humor, Santa sarcastically suggests outsourcing to the Easter Bunny. The old Santa sighed, tossing his hat onto the desk. Guess I'll pack my bags for Costa Bomb and let some fresh blood take over this operation. A week later, the replacement Santa strutted into the North Pole like he owned the place. Tall, lanky, and way too young for the job, he had this hipster vibe, wire-rimmed glasses, a string of Tibetan goat bells around his neck, and bell-bottomed red pants. His beard, a tangled mess that made the goblin craftsmen side-eye each other in horror. First order of business. Firing the reindeer because his sleigh ran on pure energy, whatever that meant. He called everyone man, which drove the elves up the wall, and he wouldn't stop snapping his fingers like some beatnik poet. Then came the modernization spiel. Half the workshop got axed for assembly lines because, according to him, nobody's into hand-carved Noah's Arks anymore, man. All about tech now. The mood in the canteen was grim when the workers huddled up. "This guy's killing my vibe," groaned Brown the snowman, while a gnome muttered about being forced to craft anti-whatever missiles. Even Rudolph, usually the optimist, flicked his glowing nose in frustration. "Maybe we messed up, team." All eyes landed on Sean O'Haircut, who squirmed under the pressure. "Fine, fine," he grumbled. "I'll track down the old man. At least he didn't turn the place into a corporate nightmare." Christmas Eve morning, Sean found the original Santa sprawled on a Costa Bomb beach, soaking up rays in red swim trunks. After a long chat and a few margaritas, they boarded a turbocharged sleigh plane back to the pole. The moment Santa stormed into the workshop, chaos froze midair. "What in tinsel-covered nonsense is this?" he bellowed, eyeing the conveyor belts and missing reindeer. "Who's in charge here?" 5 minutes later, the hipster Santa went flying out of the manager's office, literally. Santa clapped his hands, shrugging into his fur-trimmed coat. "Clock's ticking, folks. Let's fix this mess, and yeah, bonuses are coming. Big ones." The elves cheered. Turns out, nostalgia still pays. Meanwhile, in 1850s Gritcher, Mayor Albert Winsepartner, a round, rosy-cheeked man who'd made a fortune shipping rabbits to Australia, was strolling downtown with his distracted clerk, Blanket. "Blanket," Albert mused, gazing at the frosty streets, "breaks my heart thinking of folks going hungry on Christmas." Blanket nodded absently, probably mentally tallying his own dinner menu. "Tell you what," Albert declared. "We're ordering 100 pies for the poor, each one a foot wide. Nothing says Christmas like a proper pie." And thus, the legend of the blackberry pie began, but that's another story. New details added. The hipster Santa's pure energy sleigh replacing peer driven for absurdity. Santa and Sean sharing margaritas on the beach, because why not? Blanket's internal monologue about his own dinner plans, subtle humor. Tone shift. From the elves' frustration to Santa's triumphant return, the mood pivots from exasperation to energized resolve. Us adjustments. High street, downtown, swimming trunks, swim trunks, queue, line, etc. Blanket barely registered the instructions. Back in his office, he casually mentioned the idea to his assistant, who passed it along to a secretary, who then rushed to inform Mr. Gwilliam Plum, the town's most famous baker. "A pie 100 feet wide," Plum gasped, nearly dropping his rolling pin. "You're joking, but 100 feet, that's insane." A slow grin spread across his face. This was his shot at culinary immortality. By morning, he'd rallied every baker and butcher in Blackberry, his voice booming with excitement. "This won't just be a pie, it'll be the pie of the century. A masterpiece so colossal, so mouth-watering, it'll make history." Just then, A wiry man in a top hat and a smoldering cigar sauntered over. "Cooks won't cut it for this monstrosity," he drawled. "You need an engineer. Name's Isambard Brunel. Since I'm between bridges and locomotives at the moment, why not tackle the real challenge, baking a pie the size of a city block?" And so he did. A massive plot on the edge of town was cleared, and 1,000 workers scrambled to construct the world's largest oven. Brunel puffed his cigar, squinting at the sky. "Now, where do we find a dish big enough? It'd have to be as wide as a gas tank." His eyes flicked toward Blackberry Gas Works, and suddenly, 50 men were sprinting that way with a saw. Meanwhile, wagons groaned up the hill, piled high with ingredients. 500 tons of flour, Plum muttered, checking his endless list. 3 tons of salt, 2 tons of pepper, and don't forget the single bay leaf. The overturned gas tank became the pie dish, and 200 pastry chefs frantically layered the crust. Then came the meat, wagons upon wagons of beef, mutton, chicken, even goose and bacon, all shoveled in like a carnivorous avalanche. The colossal lid was lowered, and Brunel ignited the oven with his cigar tip. "Unbelievable," Plum gasped, skidding into the makeshift pie office. "The Queen's coming, just got the telegram." Instantly, the crowd snapped to attention. Brunel, ever the innovator, immediately sketched plans for a 50-foot pie cutter fit for royalty. The pie itself became a sensation, steaming like a volcano, drawing crowds who roasted chestnuts by its fiery base. A carnival sprang up around it, with tours circling the warm crust for a shilling a pop, all while the Blackberry Silver Band played jaunty tunes. On Christmas Eve, Plum collapsed into bed, visions of royal praise dancing in his head. But he jolted awake in a cold sweat. "Oh no, the egg cup," he yelped, tripping over his own trousers in his haste. At dawn, Plum sprinted barefoot down Blackberry High Street, the pie's shadow swallowing the town. He hammered on the pie office door until a bleary-eyed Brunel yanked it open. "What's the emergency?" Plum gasped. "We forgot the egg cup." Brunel rubbed his tired eyes, squinting at the massive pie as a low growl echoed from its depths. "Why's an egg cup such a big deal?" he muttered. The baker beside him gasped. "Without one, the steam has nowhere to go. Boom. No pie, just shrapnel." By now, crowds gathered under the morning sun, drawn by the spectacle. Brunel's stomach twisted, imagining the chaos a runaway pie could unleash. He pressed his ear to the oven door, deafening rumbling. "Back up," he shouted, but rumble, rumble, boom, pastry shrapnel shredded hay bales miles away. Gravy geysered skyward. A chunk of beef obliterated the courthouse clock tower. Peas ricocheted like BB pellets. The crust vanished. Over in Shropshire, folks blinked as suet rained down like greasy confetti. Meanwhile, Blackberry citizens cheered, brandishing cutlery like warriors. The only sound, a symphony of chewing. Queen Victoria, sipping tea at Windsor, frowned as a flaky UFO sailed past. "Most undignified," she sniffed. Perched on the church spire, snow dusting his shoulders, Brunel sighed at Plum dangling from the weather vane. "Next time," he said, "I'm building bridges." Good King Wenceslas hits the airwaves. King Wenceslas peered through the frosted palace window on the feast of Stephen. Behind him, a radio crackled. Tonight's forecast: bone-chilling cold, knee-deep snow, and naturally a full moon. Movement caught his eye, a shivering figure trudging through drifts, lugging what looked like an empty gas can. The king's heart ached. "Poor soul," he murmured, desperate to brave this. He summoned his page, Albert. "Who's that frozen fellow yonder?" Albert squinted. "Oh, that's Jim Sponge, the DJ. You've never heard his show, sire." "A what jockey?" "He spins records, tells bad jokes." Once read a casserole recipe in falsetto. The king stroked his beard. "A grim fate indeed. Where does he dwell?" "Some shack near forest fence. Plays his tunes loud enough to scare wolves." Wenceslas nodded solemnly. "'Tis the season. Fetch provisions, meat, wine, firewood, and my coziest scarf." Albert returned, grimacing. "Sire, we've got freezer-burnt sausages, Portish grape juice, and 2 eco-friendly coal lumps. Also, Parliament cut your allowance again. The king sighed. So much for royal generosity, the king sighed as he adjusted his coat. Even his birthday salute had been cut down to a measly 11.5 guns. But duty called, and he wasn't about to let a little austerity dampen his holiday spirit. "Pack it up, lad," he said, straightening his shoulders. "We're off to spread some Yuletide joy." Minutes later, the king and Albert trudged away from the drafty castle, their boots sinking deep into the fresh snow. The storm was relentless, swallowing the landscape in thick white waves. Albert's hat bobbed like a tiny red beacon in the blizzard. "Cheer up," the king boomed over the wind. "Think of the warmth we're bringing to someone in need." Albert shivered violently. "Trying, sire, but my feet are frozen solid and I'm pretty sure my toes just filed for divorce." "Walk behind me, step where I step. It'll help. Now where exactly are we?" the blizzard howled, erasing their footprints as fast as they made them. Albert squinted into the whiteout. "I'd say we're approximately lost, sire." They stumbled blindly until the king collided with a striped pole. "A signpost," he declared triumphantly. "Climb up and read it." Albert scrambled up, teeth chattering. "It says reduce speed now." "Well, at least we're on a road, progress." "Sire." "Yes, Albert." "Can I please get down before my fingers snap off?" They pressed on until their feet screamed in protest. Then, on the king's 14th spectacular faceplant into the snow, the usual crunch was replaced by a metallic clunk. "There's something in here," the king exclaimed. Buried beneath the drift was a sleek Rolls-Royce gleaming like a mirage. The king rubbed his numb hands together. "Albert, given the dire circumstances, and after careful consideration, I command you to check if the doors are unlocked." Miraculously, they were. The two collapsed onto the plush seats, sighing in relief as warmth seeped back into their bones. "Who owns this thing?" Albert marveled, running a hand over the polished dashboard. "Doesn't matter. We're warm, we've got food, unlike poor Mr. Sponge." Speaking of Sponge, he was just staggering into the local radio station, gas can in hand. "Worst night to run out of petrol," he groaned to the doorman. "Worse than that," the man replied. "They've lost the king." Back at the castle, panic had set in. The royal Christmas message recording was cancelled. No king, no speech. Search parties scrambled into the storm. Without him, who would launch ships, cut ribbons, and horror of horrors, they'd have to put the prime minister on the stamps. Meanwhile, the castle cook overheard the page's frantic muttering. They went looking for some poor soul in the snow. One afternoon, a guard at the castle mentioned spotting a guy walking by with a gas can. Apparently, the king had a soft spot for helping folks out. Jim raised an eyebrow considering this. Before long, he was trudging back through the snow, lugging a full gas can himself. As he shoveled through the drift covering his Rolls-Royce, he caught snippets of a game drifting from inside. "I spy with my little eye something starting with S, seat, steering wheel, snow, ignition switch." "Nope, keep guessing." Jim yanked the door open with a grin. "Morning, gang. Knew I'd track you down. Scoot over, I'm driving. Let's get this show on the road." As the engine hummed back toward town, Jim casually dropped the bombshell that radio hosts weren't exactly broke, then nearly choked when he learned just how strapped for cash good King Wenceslas really was. "Well, that's just not right," he declared. "First stop, the fanciest restaurant in town, La Solo Doré, where he treated them to a feast and fancy cigars. Next, a not-so-friendly chat with the Prime Minister. Either you bump up the king's salary or I'll spill the beans on my show," Jim warned. "And trust me, housewives hate a cheapskate." The Prime Minister stammered. "Well, we never really thought." "Exactly. Start thinking," Jim shot back. By evening, the king was co-hosting Jim's radio show, reading fan requests and even cracking a few jokes. Walking back to the castle under a sky full of stars, Albert noticed the king humming a pop tune. "You know what, Albert?" the king mused. "I've got a good feeling about this year." Dragon Quest long ago in the tiny, goat-filled kingdom of Grig population. 1,000 humans, 5,000 goats. King Griddlebone the sorta decent was ruling, if you could call it that, from his bed while eating breakfast. One Sunday, a parade of page boys barged in since, newspapers hadn't been invented yet. Dragons attack crumbling castle, the first page yelled, then added casually, details on page 3. The king fumbled his spoon. Dragons. Those hadn't been seen in ages. Page 3 spilled the terrifying details, and page 4 helpfully reminded him the people expected action. Fine, toss 'em out with a penny each, Griddlebone grumbled to his butler. Then round up the knights. Later, he stood in the courtyard, squinting through his spectacles at his men. All right, who's volunteering? He paused, adjusting his glasses. Wait, is that a dragon over there? New detail. The king's sudden realization that one knight was, in fact, a very confused goat in armor. New twist. The tone shifts from folksy humor to mock dramatic as Griddlebone's brave plan unravels. The courtyard stood eerily empty except for a scrawny kid drowning in oversized chainmail. Where is everyone? The king demanded, glancing around. The boy shrugged. Dunno, your majesty. Someone mentioned dragons, and suddenly everyone came down with a terrible case of not wanting to die today, except me. The king grinned. Brave lad, tell you what, take my spare armor and go deal with those fire-breathing nuisances, would you? Soon enough, young Ralph, now clanking like a sack of loose pots, rode out on a stubborn donkey, whistling like he hadn't a care in the world. The second the castle vanished behind the hills, he ditched the armor behind a bush. Hot, heavy, and sounds like a haunted hinge, he muttered, slipping into his regular clothes instead. The pair ambled along winding country roads, past golden fields and tidy little groves until they reached a dense oak forest. Shadows stretched between the trees like grasping fingers. This place looks unfriendly, Ralph admitted. Probably crawling with wolves and worse, the donkey agreed. Ralph nearly fell off. You talk, the donkey flicked an ear. Not much to say, usually. Grass is grass, you know. Then he trotted ahead. They'd barely stepped into the woods when a hulking knight in black armor thundered toward them on a snorting stallion. Halt in the name of the Friday night, he roared. Ralph blinked. Sure, but is this the way to Crumbling Castle? The knight lifted his visor, suddenly conversational. Yeah, actually. Then he snapped it shut and bellowed. But you must face me in combat first. The stallion charged. Ralph fumbled with his rusted sword, but before he could even draw it, the knight toppled off his horse with a spectacular clang. A tiny door popped open on the armorer's back, revealing a very small, very embarrassed man inside. Whoops, the knight said. Best 2 out of 3. Nope, Ralph said. You fell, I win. Technically correct, the donkey chimed in. Rule Roman 7/2A of the Manual of Chivalry. Ralph stared. The tiny knight gawked. I'm calling you Fortnite, Ralph decided. Because I just fought you. After some awkward clanking, Fortnite emerged from his metal shell and the trio continued on. Surprisingly, Fortnite turned out to be a riot, great with jokes, decent at singing, and altogether better company than expected. The next morning, they found a wizard perched on a mile marker, nose buried in a massive book. The old wizard looked every bit the part. Long white beard, pointy hat, a flowing robe covered in mystical symbols, and oversized boots that he'd kicked off to reveal a pair of shockingly ordinary red socks. Ralph hesitated before speaking. Wizards weren't exactly known for their patience. Excuse me, sir, he began carefully. Is this the right path to Crumbling Castle? Absolutely, by St. Transome's beard. The wizard replied, scratching his head. Though I could use a hand with a little magical mishap. Introducing himself as Pulgarlic, he explained that his enchanted 7-league boots had given out mid-journey. Normally, they'd let him cover vast distances effortlessly, but now they were just a pair of stubborn footwear refusing to cooperate. Luckily, Fortnite had a knack for tinkering, and between his mechanical know-how and Pulgarlic's spotty magical expertise, they managed to revive one boot, sort of. It's more of a 3.5-league boot now, Fortnite admitted. You'll have to hop the rest of the way." Grateful for the help, Pilgarlic decided to tag along. The landscape grew bleaker with each passing mile. Fog-cloaked mountains rose on either side, the sun vanished behind iron-gray clouds, and a biting wind nipped at their heels. By the time they stumbled upon a cave tucked behind a thicket of brambles, even Ralph was shivering. "A fire would be nice," he muttered. "Child's play," Pilgarlic declared, then proceeded to pull from his sleeves, in rapid succession, a tiny hat, a broken bucket handle, a featherless bird somehow, a banana, and a tarnished candlestick. With a sigh, he finally fished out a box of matches from his hat. The fire sputtered to life, and after a meager meal they dozed off, only for the flames to die into a sad pile of ash. Crack! A twig snapped in the darkness. Fortnight jolted awake. Something was shuffling toward them, something with very large feet. An owl hooted, then abruptly choked mid-cry as if reconsidering its life choices. "Stand down, by St. Caradoc," Fortnight bellowed, snatching up his sword, only to trip over Pilgarlic's sprawled legs. Chaos erupted. Swords were grabbed, bushes were charged into, and in the pitch-black confusion they kept smacking into each other and yelping as thorns jabbed their ankles. "Got it!" Fortnight yelled triumphantly, leaping onto me. Pilgarlic groaned from the leaf litter. Meanwhile, something small and sneaky emerged from the shadows, warming itself by the dying embers before sniffing around Pilgarlic's pack and devouring his breakfast for the next day. "There it is!" Ralph shouted as they stumbled back into the clearing. "It's a dragon," Fortnight squinted. "A teeny one. Barely the size of a tea kettle, the creature was moss-green, comically big-footed, and currently sniffling like a scolded puppy. "Maybe my breakfast disagreed with it," Pilgarlic grumbled, eyeing his ransacked bag. Ralph shrugged. "Doesn't seem all that threatening, even if it is a dragon." Fortnight crouched, attempting a smile. "Did you lose your mama, little guy?" The dragon recoiled, puffing a pathetic wisp of smoke in his face. Fortnight had never been good with kids. In the end, they tucked the tiny beast into their cooking pot, clamped the lid on, and went back to sleep, though Ralph made a mental note to never let Pilgarlic pack breakfast again the next morning. The trio set off with Pilgarlic lugging the heavy kettle on his back. Before long, the lid popped open, revealing the curious face of the baby dragon. "This isn't exactly dragon territory," Ralph remarked, scanning the unfamiliar landscape. "Must have wandered off," Fortnight shrugged. "It's the green kind," Pilgarlic added, adjusting his grip. "They grow up to 20 feet tall, then start terrorizing villages, burning down barns, and generally causing mayhem." "What kind of mayhem?" Ralph pressed. "Oh, you know, the usual," Pilgarlic muttered. "Leaving cupboard doors open, stealing the last slice of pie, real monsters." By afternoon, they reached Crumbling Castle, perched on a gentle slope with a sleepy town nestled around it. A wide moat, dug by locals diverting a stream, stretched before them, but the place was eerily deserted, no villagers, no dragons, not even a stray cat. Summoning their courage, they knocked on the massive black door. Silence. "Nobody home," Fortnight declared as the echoes faded. "Let's scram." "Your turn," Ralph nudged Pilgarlic. "Got any magic words for locked doors?" "Of course," the wizard huffed, clearing his throat. "Trafgriship of Steetning, Mylagrashi Poodle." "I command thee to open in the name of Bredaloxel." The door shimmered, turning a soft pink. Ralph poked it, then broke off a piece and chewed thoughtfully. "Meringue," he announced. "Delicious," Fortnight agreed, munching as they ate their way inside. The courtyard was dead silent. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Ralph muttered. "Like something's about to jump us." "Charming," Pilgarlic snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Relax," Ralph said, grabbing the wizard's cloak as he tried to bolt. "Most dragons are no bigger than a 2-story house or hotter than a pizza oven." Just then, a massive green dragon rounded the corner, raising an eyebrow at the group. "Good morning," it said politely, throwing them off completely. "How do you fight a well-mannered dragon?" Morning," Ralph stammered. "So, are you the one burning down villages?" "Only the ones with rude mayors," the dragon replied. Two more dragons lumbered over and one smirked. "You must be the brave heroes here to slay us." "Something like that," Ralph admitted. "Where's everyone hiding?" "Up in the hills, the cowards," the first dragon grumbled. "Why, what they do?" Pilgarlic asked, eyeing the dragon's razor-sharp teeth. "They kidnapped our prince," the dragon growled. "My son, consider this payback." Ralph blinked. "About this tall, big feet. Constantly stealing bacon," Pilgarlic added. "Fortnight reached into the kettle and pulled out the baby dragon. Found him wandering alone," Ralph explained. And just like that, the whole mess was settled. The dragons were absolutely thrilled to have their baby back, so they wasted no time in preparing to leave. As a peace offering for the chaos they'd caused, they left behind several chests of glittering dragon treasure for the people of Crumbling Castle. Sure, they couldn't exactly bring back the folks they'd eaten, but let's be honest, those guys weren't winning any popularity contests anyway. Nobody seemed too broken up about it. Who would have thought? "An adventure with barely any bloodshed," Ralph remarked as the trio strolled out of the castle the next morning. The crowd erupted in cheers as they passed through the gates. Fortnight, ever the tough guy, grumbled, "I could have taken those dragons down easy if they'd given me the chance," before promptly tripping over his own sword. The laughter followed them all the way over the rolling hills. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Mr. Humphrey Cozy's peaceful life took a bizarre turn when he decided to spruce up his front yard with a fancy rock garden. He'd gone all out: concrete slabs, a tiny pond, and even a bargain assortment of plants from the local quick-grow garden center. But the real finishing touch: the gnomes. There were 3 of them. A cheerful plastic fellow in a bright red hat lounging by the pond, a sturdy concrete gnome rocking some snazzy yellow trousers, and a weathered stone gnome with a chipped ear and a smirk that screamed trouble, perched on top of a neon green frog. Mr. Cozy admired his handiwork, smugly thinking, "That'll show Jones next door and his ridiculous bird table." A week later, he came home from work to find his wife Agnes crouched in the hallway, peeking through the mail slot like a detective on a stakeout. "Honey," he started. "SHHH," she snapped. "There's something moving on the rockery. Probably just a cat," he suggested. "Unless cats wear tiny green hats and stand 3 inches tall," she shot back. Mr. Cozy blinked. "Now, Agnes, Mr. Brown down the street has a greenish-blue hat. Mr. Brown isn't the size of a soda can." Agnes stood up, eyes narrowed, and jabbed a finger toward the yard. "Listen, there's a tiny man out there. He's been creeping around all day, eyeing the gnomes like he's casing the joint. If you don't deal with him, I swear I'll lose it." With that, she stormed off, leaving Mr. Cozy to investigate. Sure enough, the little guy was perched on a rock by the pond, puffing on a pipe like he owned the place. "Evening, mate," the gnome said cheerfully. "Lovely weather we're having, eh?" Mr. Cozy nodded slowly, turned on his heel, and walked back inside. He and Agnes exchanged a long look in the kitchen. "He smokes a pipe," he said weakly. "I know," she replied. For the rest of the night, they took turns spying through the mail slot. "I mean, how many people can say they've got a real gnome in their garden?" Mr. Cozy mused as they headed to bed. Agnes smirked. "Exactly. Jones' bird table didn't even attract a pigeon for a week. Our rockery, exclusive." New detail: the gnome winks at Mr. Cozy before vanishing into the bushes, leaving behind a faint trail of glitter. Mr. Cozy admired the gnome's uniqueness. "It definitely stands out from your average garden ornament," he remarked. Agnes, already in her robe, moved with determination. "I'm setting out some bread and milk for our little guest," she said warmly. By sunrise, a sign stood proudly beside the stone figure. "Stately Gnomes of England, P.H. Gimlet, proprietor, experience the breathtaking petrified grotto. Gaze upon the fearsome emerald frog. Scenic boat rides among the lilies. A wholesome adventure for the whole family." Nearby, a bright red and white mushroom had sprouted overnight, complete with tiny doors and windows. The gnome lounged outside in a pint-sized deck chair. Mr. Cozy, mid-rose pruning, squinted at the sign, then down at the grinning figure. "You're this Gimlet fellow?" he asked skeptically. "Guilty as charged, old sport," the gnome replied. "Though this is just phase one, my real vision, a drive-through wildlife park, no need to even unbuckle your seatbelt." Mr. Cozy relayed the news to his wife, who shrugged. "Wouldn't it be lovely for him to have company? Honestly, dear, you're overreacting." A knock interrupted them. A sheepish man from town and country coach tour stood on the porch, gesturing to a gleaming bus idling at the curb. "Got a call demandin' regular trips here," the driver explained. He motioned to the chaos behind him. "That'll be 26 quid. Good luck with all this." The garden was overrun. Gnomes picnicked on the lawn, scaled the rockery, and toddlers, baby gnomes, zigzagged wildly. Elderly ones cast fishing lines into the pond, while guided tour weaved past garden decor. "I refuse to pay," Mr. Cozy shrieked. "Take it up with Gimlet." By afternoon, gnomes kept rapping on the door, parched. Finally snapping, Mr. Cozy stormed toward the toadstool, attempted to storm, dodging sunbathing gnomes in their tiny coolers, and hammered the roof. "Get out here, you conniving little crook," he roared. "I've had enough. Give me back my garden." The mushroom shuddered, the door collapsing. "Shoddy craftsmanship," Gimlet sighed, adjusting his suspenders. "Rushed jobs never last." "What's the trouble, Gov? In this madness? I swear if you don't, I'll flatten this fungus of yours." Then Mr. Cozy spotted it, a sign staked in his prized rose bed. "Future home of 120 deluxe mushroom residences builder, Tinkerbell Construction Co. Ph." His vision went red. Somewhere, a tiny kazoo band started playing. Mr. Cozy was fuming as he glared at the stone gnomes cluttering his yard. "I swear I'm gonna chuck these tacky things straight into the pond," he grumbled. Gimlet, ever the businessman, shot him a look. "Bad move, pal. Those little guys are cash cows. How'd you feel if strangers stomped all over your lawn?" "Been there," Gimlet muttered, bitterness creeping into his voice. "They bulldozed my old woods to slap up a bunch of cookie-cutter houses. Hang on, left my kettle boiling." He hurried off, leaving Mr. Cozy sighing as he wove through the gnome-packed garden. That's when he spotted it, a shiny new sign by the pond, the magic human being wishing well. A slow grin spread across his face. 20 minutes of furious hammering later, Mr. Cozy emerged from his shed with a massive sign and slapped it on the gate. Not 5 minutes passed before Gimlet was banging on his door, furious. "There's a mob out there gawking at my gnomes." "Yep," Mr. Cozy said cheerfully. "They're here for the Pixies' tea party. Your sign invited 'em." Gimlet's face turned purple. "My customers hate being ogled. One almost got squashed." He stormed off, tearing down his signs and stomping across the grass. By sunset, the garden was empty. That night, Mr. Cozy dug a deep hole at the far end of the yard and unceremoniously buried 3 gnomes. The next day, he came home with a tiny concrete mermaid for the pond. But when he walked inside, his wife was crouched by the door, wide-eyed. "There's a school of fish women in the goldfish pond," she whispered. They both peeked through the mail slot. Mr. Cozy groaned. "Oh, for crying out loud!" From the horse's mouth, blackberries got a way of turning the ordinary into the downright bizarre. "Maybe it's the air, maybe it's the water, but weirdness just sticks here. Take John, Ron Weasel's old nag. Ron was the last junk collector in town, a guy who thought soap was optional and dust bunnies were pets. One crisp morning, with the sun bleeding red over the town hall, Ron shuffled out to the stable to feed John. As he adjusted the nose bag, a voice rumbled, "Lovely morning." Ron glanced around. "Sure is," he said absently, expecting to see a neighbor. "That was me," Jono clarified, sounding mildly offended. Now Ron wasn't what you'd call refined, but he wasn't stupid. If a horse started chatting, he wasn't about to pretend it didn't happen. "Well, well," he drawled. "Since when do you get so chatty?" Jono flicked his tail. "You said it was a fine morning. Usually you just grumble." Ron scratched his stubble. Fair point. Jono turned in his stall with a smirk, flashing a row of crooked yellow teeth. Oh, so now that I can talk, suddenly it's all polite requests and pleas instead of yanking me around like some dumb beast. No more move it, you lazy nag, or quit dawdling. Now we're all sweetness and manners, huh? Ron shrugged. Fine, let's hit Station Road. Been a while. Luck was on their side. By noon, they'd hauled in enough to justify a break. Parked in a quiet alley, Ron munched on a sandwich while flipping through the sports section. Jono cleared his throat. Listen, I've been doing this job forever, and what do I get? Scraps. The whole operation would fall apart without me. Not that you're the worst boss, but I'm taking next week off or I walk. I want to go fox hunting. Ron nearly choked. Fox hunting, that's fancy folks' business, and I don't even know how to ride. Not my problem, Jono shot back. Either we go or I'm out. So Ron reluctantly signed up for the blackberry hunt, wincing at the cost of the bright red coat, hunting pink. The shopkeeper insisted, though it looked like fire engine red to Ron. Skip the saddle, Jono grumbled. I'll keep you on. Just pray there aren't any mangy mutts around, can't stand 'em. Ron hesitated. There might be a few hounds. The next morning, Ron fumbled into his ridiculous outfit and rode to the Jug and Bottle, where the hunt gathered. The crowd of riders sipping fancy drinks eyed him strangely, probably the flat cap he forgot to swap out. When the bartender asked for his order, Ron muttered, "Brown ale." "And I'll take a pale ale in a bucket," Jono added loudly. "And keep those flea-bitten dogs away from me," the bartender blinked. "Right." The horn blasted from the woods, and before Ron could brace himself, Jono launched forward like a freight train. Hedges, more like speed bumps. Ron clung on for dear life, jostled like a rag doll while Jono barreled ahead, snarling at the yapping hounds. Catching up to the exhausted fox, Jono panted. "So what's the deal? Trophy? Medal?" Ron wheezed out the grim reality. Jono recoiled. "Absolutely not. What kind of barbaric nonsense is this? Hey there, Foxy. Yeah, you with the bushy tail, I've got your back." The fox's ears perked up, and with a desperate bound, it scrambled onto Jono's back behind Ron. "All right then," Jono cheered. "Time to leave those mangy hounds eating our dust." With that, they tore across the countryside, leaving chaos in their wake. Far behind them, the master of foxhounds, Lord Cake, was practically fuming, first red, then purple, then ghostly white with rage. But since he's not important anymore, let's just say the hunt's furious shouts faded into the distance as Jono trotted gracefully through the rolling hills of Gritshire. "Now what?" Jono asked, his hooves kicking up dust. "I just want to go home," Ron groaned. "Home? Don't be ridiculous," Jono scoffed. "The fun's just getting started. Beats hauling that rickety cart through town any day." They rounded a thicket of trees, and oh no, there it was, Blackberry Racecourse, packed for the Gritshire handicap. Jono's eyes gleamed as he peeked over the fence. "You know what? I could win this thing," Ron groaned. "Please don't." Nobody paid them much mind, not even the snoozing fox, as they wandered the grounds. After all, the place was swarming with jockeys and spectators. But when Jono neared the paddock and let out a soft whinny, every racehorse perked up, crowding the fence like old friends swapping secrets. Ron tugged at Jono's mane. "We really should leave." Too late. As the racehorses lined up, Jono nudged his way in like he belonged. "Oi, what's this?" a jockey barked. The starter gaped. "Hey, you can't," but the gate flew up and the horses bolted. Well, most of them. Some slowed to a stroll, nibbling grass like they'd forgotten the race entirely, their riders exchanging baffled glances. Jono plodded past, grinning. "How'd you pull that off?" Ron hissed. Jono smirked. They felt bad for a poor cart horse stuck on city streets. Then, oh no, he spotted it, the gleaming silver cup on the winner's table. Before anyone could react, Jono lunged, snatched it in his teeth, and vaulted the fence like a champion. "Now that's a trophy." He crowed, galloping into the sunset. They'd barely made it down the road when chaos erupted behind them. The blackberry hunt had arrived at the racetrack, and for a moment Jono was the last thing on anyone's mind. Dogs yapped, officials yelped from unexpected nips, and jockeys and hunters scrambled in total disarray. "Home," Ron declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Tomorrow I'll return that cup," Jono snorted. "Yeah, good luck explaining that. Oh, by the way, my horse talks. Real convincing." He flicked his tail. "Besides, I won that thing fair and square, well, mostly." By the time they reached Ron's junkyard, night had fallen. Ron shoved Jono and the fox into the stable, slammed the door shut, and bolted upstairs before anyone spotted him. The next morning he found the cup tucked neatly in Jono's feed trough, the fox curled up beside it like a furry guardian. "Miserable morning," Ron muttered, rubbing his hands together. Jono stayed silent, chewing lazily on a piece of straw. "Might brighten up later," Ron added, more to himself than the horse. Then it hit him. "Wait a second, you've gone mute." He reached for the cup, only for Jono to stomp lightly on his boot. Ron blinked, then disappeared and returned with a heaping double portion of mash. "Take your time with breakfast," he said, trying to sound casual. "Then maybe we'll see about some light work." As he walked away, Ron scratched his head. Did I imagine the whole thing? But the gleaming cup told another story. Meanwhile, Jono buried his nose in the feed bag, grinning. Double rations and a little respect, not bad. Life was looking up. And it was. Blackberry's bizarre weather strikes again. It was just another Saturday in the sleepy market town of Blackberry, except for the cup final raging on the Rovers field behind the Gridley Sausage Co. factory. With the score tied at 85 minutes, the crowd gasped as East Slate's star winger, Jim Sponge, tore toward the goal. Then out of nowhere, a tiny storm cloud popped into the clear blue sky. It rumbled ominously, hovered for a second, then zipped straight for Sponge. Just as he took his shot, bang! A flash of lightning and Jim's smoking boots landed halfway up the stands. Jim himself, found dazed and eyebrowless on the locker room roof. The ball vanished. That night, Alderman Morris Oxford slammed his fist on the town hall table. First, it hails cricket ball-sized ice chunks during the minister's speech. Then a freak downpour drenches only the mayor at the pool opening. He glared around the room. This isn't weather, it's sabotage. The weather in Blackberry had gone completely haywire, and it was clear something bizarre was happening. "We need to figure this out before things get worse," Alderman Oxford started to say, then froze mid-sentence. Right in the middle of the council chamber, the air thickened unnaturally, swirling into a tiny, furious whirlwind no taller than a ruler. Before anyone could react, papers went flying, chairs toppled, and light bulbs shattered as the miniature tempest tore through the room. The committee members scrambled for the exit, tripping over each other in their panic. Oxford, quick on his feet, slammed the heavy oak doors shut just in time. From the safety of the hallway, they could hear the whirlwind wreaking havoc inside, like an angry bee trapped in a jar. Councillor Adio, who also managed the local soccer team, wiped sweat from his brow. "Indoor weather. That's not just weird, that's unnatural," he muttered. His words were cut short when a dark cloud formed right above their heads. "Move!" someone yelled. The council members bolted down the corridor, robes flapping, only to skid straight into a snowdrift. A full-blown blizzard raged between the clerk of works and accounts, while thunder rumbled ominously from the town clerk's office. Outside, chaos reigned. Icebergs floated in the kiddie pool at the park, while just half a mile away, West Blackberry baked under a scorching 96-degree sun. North Blackberry got pummeled by gale-force winds, but Newtown sat eerily still, blanketed in giant snowflakes. The strangest sight: a tiny hurricane brewing inside Mrs. Blanket's tea kettle on Mafeking Road. When she lifted the lid, it shot out like a rocket, tearing over rooftops. That night, Oxford, Adio, and Chief Inspector Artful huddled in the town hall basement, umbrellas at the ready. "London's meteorological office called," Artful whispered. "Blackberry's the only place with this madness. It stops dead at the city limits." Adio gulped, eyeing the ceiling. "Any leads?" The inspector shrugged. "Checked hailstones for prints. Even if someone's behind this, how do you arrest them? Illegal snowmaking isn't exactly in the penal code. Oxford smirked. What about disturbing the peace, or operating an unlicensed blizzard? Artful rubbed his temples. Look, I just cuff M. Legal loopholes aren't my department, but here's the thing, every affected spot is either inside this building or within sight of the clock tower. If someone's got a weather machine, my money's on them using that tower as their control center. Adio's eyes widened. Well, that's terrifying. Ever been up to the clock tower? Yeah, and we spotted fresh cigarette butts. Someone's been hanging around up there. Alderman Oxford rubbed his chin, deep in thought. Whoever this joker is, he's got a real knack for making the council look like fools, he muttered. But I've got a plan. 3 days later, Blackberry's annual mayor-making ceremony kicked off, a centuries-old tradition dating back to 1329. The outgoing mayor and the incoming one had to cross a wooden plank over the River, exchanging formal bows while the town band played. Scrolls were unrolled, and Cedric the ceremonial duck waddled around like he owned the place. This year, though, the police were on high alert. Chief Inspector Charlie Artful had officers stashed behind every bush, and he was personally camped out near the clock tower, watching for trouble. Alderman Morris Oxford, the incoming mayor, barely had time to glance up at the tower's windows before he spotted a flicker of movement. As the band struck up Blackberry Races, he stepped cautiously onto the plank, the crowd roaring below. Outgoing Mayor Horace Millparsley squinted upward. Hey, wait a second, who's that up? Zap. A tiny lightning bolt sent him tumbling into the river, where half the police force dove in after him as the current swept him downstream. The rogue thundercloud then zipped toward Morris, who barely dodged before it crashed into a tuba, blasting a deafening noise through the brass. Morris snatched a trumpet and blew a sharp note. To the tower! The weather weirdo's up there, he shouted. And just like that, the entire town was off. Council members, the band, Cedric the Duck, a sopping wet ex-mayor, and a pack of screaming kids all stampeding toward the clock tower. They found Chief Inspector Artful frozen solid, whistle halfway to his lips. Still alive. Morris panted. Wise, the inspector managed through chattering teeth. Didn't get a good look at him, just cold. Then a shout, someone spotted a figure sprinting down High Street. The mob surged forward, Morris now leading the charge. The fugitive spun, raising what looked like a rifle. FZZZT. A sheet of ice spread across the road, sending pursuers sliding in all directions. But Morris, robes flapping, skated forward like a man possessed. The chase narrowed down Slate Road, doubling back through Market Street into Bodger's Alley. Morris was closing in. With a grunt, he whipped off his mayoral chain and hurled it like a lasso. It struck the runner's gadget, sending it clattering to the cobblestones. Game on. Nice shot, boss. Someone called out as Morris sprinted forward to grab the strange device. The contraption had a massive barrel covered in dials and switches, with the largest one currently set to freeze. Without hesitation, Morris cranked it to cyclone, aimed at the fleeing figure, and slammed down a bright blue lever. Whoosh! The man yelped as he was yanked into the air, spinning wildly over Blackberry's rooftops. A gust carried him straight toward the River, and just as he hovered above the murkiest stretch, Morris flicked the switch off. Splat! The guy surfaced, coughing up muddy water while the crowd roared, "E.I. adios." Honestly, I had my suspicions about him the whole time, Morris mused later, leaning back in his chair. I mean, he is the Rovers' manager, and let's be real, getting passed over for mayor every year, that's enough to make anyone bitter. Bet he accidentally left this gizmo running in the clock tower when we were up there earlier. Charlie Artful whistled. Gotta admit, inventing this thing was genius. Where'd it go, by the way? Morris shrugged a little too casually, claiming he had no clue. But by nightfall, someone had strapped the rifle-like machine to the town clock's weather vane, set it to heat wave, and voila, Blackberry enjoyed the sunniest stretch in decades. That is, until the batteries died and the clouds rolled back in like nothing ever happened. The Blackberry jungle, like most chaos in Blackberry, it all kicked off at 3:10 p.m. sharp. That afternoon, the town council gathered in their usual haunt, the musty, wood-paneled town hall with ceilings so high even the dust bunnies needed ladders. Mayor Amos stepped forward, cleared his throat. "Folks, our parks are duller than a tax audit. We need color pizzazz. Picture this, flower beds so vibrant, tourists flock here like seagulls to fries. Maybe even a battle of flowers like they do in Jersey." Councillor Eli Prune, barely awake, mumbled, "Flowers fighting. Do they throw petals?" The mayor ignored him. "Point is, let's order seeds. Bert, handle it." So Bert Juggins, the park keeper, mailed off for a batch of premium blooms. What arrived was a suspicious stampless parcel with exactly 30 oversized seeds. "Well, these don't look like daisies," Bert muttered, but he planted them anyway, gave them a splash from the city's rusty watering can, and headed home. Later, craving his favorite pipe, he realized he'd left it in the park shed. As he trudged across the moonlit grass, flashlight in hand, something felt off. The park wasn't just quiet, it was alive. And Mayor stepped forward. Snoring through the start of it all, the night was shattered by a sharp ping-ping-ping against the mayor's bedroom window, like someone had tossed a bucket of marbles at it. Groggy and half asleep, he staggered to the sill, yanked it open, and slurred, "Wow, what's the racket?" Down below, the park keeper, Bert, was practically bouncing off the pavement. "Mayor, you gotta see this. The park's gone bananas, literally." "Bananas?" The mayor squinted into the darkness. "Of course things are growing, it's a park." He slammed the window shut and flopped back into bed, grumbling, "What's next?" Complaining the ocean's too wet. But outside, chaos was unfolding. The park had vanished under a jungle of twisting vines and exploding greenery. Trees shot up like fireworks, unfurling leaves the size of umbrellas before sprouting fat, purple fruits. A rogue vine slithered up the town hall, aiming straight for the clock tower. By dawn, the mayor woke to something tickling his nose, a sunflower the size of a dinner plate sprouting from a branch that had busted through his window. His room was a botanical battleground. Thorny bushes snagged his pants, his hat dangled from a creeper near the ceiling, and a rogue melon bonked him on the head. The front door, sealed shut by foliage. He had to shimmy out the window like a squirrel escaping a dog. The town of Blackberry was unrecognizable, buried under a tidal wave of green. The postman lounged on a tree branch, casually peeling a banana. "Wild, huh?" he said, offering one. "One minute it's Tuesday, the next it's the Amazon." The mayor clawed his way through the chaos, climbing trees when the ground became impassable. Townsfolk poked at the jungle, some already harvesting armfuls of grapes. "Might as well enjoy it," the mayor muttered, eyeing a vine. "Bet I could swing like Tarzan." Thud. He landed in a heap of ferns, rubbing his forehead. Bert groaned beside him. "Sorry, boss, didn't see you coming." "Feel like I got hit by a falling coconut," the mayor groaned. "Bert, what were those seeds you planted?" Bert winced. Pretty sure they weren't just seeds. Above them the jungle pulsed, leaves rustling like laughter. Somewhere a parrot squawked. "Wait, since when did Blackberry have parrots?" Bert stared at the seed packet in disbelief. "Hollyhocks and daisies, yeah, right. Whoever sent these must have had a serious mix-up, or a wicked sense of humor." He tossed the empty packet aside, where it fluttered down into a tangle of vines. The mayor, perched on a sturdy branch of his hugger-mugger tree, scratched his head. "You're telling me this whole jungle is gonna vanish in a day, after all the money we've made?" he groaned, imagining the chaos when the vines turned to dust mid-safari. Down below, the town was buzzing, literally. A swarm of tourists snapped photos of the exotic foliage, while Bert's gorilla act drew both laughter and skeptical glances. One kid tugged on his mom's sleeve, whispering, "That's just Mr. Jenkins from the park in a costume." Meanwhile, Councillor Prune was still lost somewhere in the bamboo, shouting for help between bites of a ripe mango. The mayor sighed. "We've got a choice, either panic or cash in while we still can." By sunset, Blackberry had doubled its ticket prices. The next morning, as the first tour buses rolled in, the leaves began to wilt. The mayor, ever the showman, spun it as a rare jungle phenomenon. Tourists gasped as vines crumbled like overcooked spaghetti, just in time for the grand finale, Bert's gorilla suit shedding fur in clumps. As the last banana tree shrank into the ground, the mayor dusted off his suit and grinned. "All right, who's up for a tropical-themed flea market next week?" The branch cracked under the mayor's weight, and if Bert hadn't grabbed him in time, he would have tumbled straight out of the tree. "I've been checking things out," Bert muttered, brushing dry bark off his sleeves. "Half these trees are already brittle as old newspaper. We need to warn everyone before it gets worse." The mayor groaned as they climbed down, more worried about refunds than safety. "You think folks will demand their money back?" He fretted, just before a massive branch smacked him on the head. Instead of pain, it disintegrated into a puff of dust, coating his suit in a fine powder. By the time their boots hit the ground, the air was thick with debris. The entire jungle groaned like an overbaked cake, crumbling into nothing. One by one, the houses of Blackberry reappeared as if someone had flipped a switch. Tourists, oblivious to the disaster, snapped photos like it was some kind of magic show. The mayor sighed, picking twigs from his hair. "So much for those exotic fruits. Now we've got a mountain of dust to haul away, costing us a fortune." Bert smirked, kicking at the ashy remains of a vine. "Sure, the jungle was fun while it lasted, but let's be honest, Blackberry's better without all this nonsense." "Couldn't agree more," the mayor grumbled. "Let's get out of here before something else collapses." The haunted steamroller Blackberry's roadworks department had a relic among its machines. A hulking maroon steamroller J22, all brass knobs and hissing pipes. It guzzled coal like a furnace and demanded endless polishing, but it was Bert Nettle's pride and joy. He'd driven it since before the borough surveyor was in diapers. Then the mayor dropped the axe. "J22's a dinosaur," he declared. "Time to scrap it and get a proper diesel model." The surveyor hesitated. "Bert won't take it well. That old machine's his whole life." And it was. Bert, with his moth-eaten whiskers and tarnished pocket watch, spent more time buffing J22 than sleeping. When he heard the news, he stormed home early, leaving the steamroller cooling in the garage. His tiny house was a shrine to maintenance, shelves sagging under polished cans, drawers stuffed with grease tubes. Midnight chimed across Blackberry, then clank. A hiss. Deep in J22's belly, the firebox sparked to life. The flywheel creaked, then spun. With a defiant chuff-chuff, the steamroller lurched forward, straight through the garage door. The garage door burst open with a crash as J22 barreled through, tearing down the deserted streets. Sleepy residents flung open their windows in shock as the runaway steamroller rumbled past, its chimney spewing sparks like a fireworks show. Old Bert jolted awake at the racket, pulling on his pants in a hurry. "Well, this is a fine mess," he muttered, realizing his prized machine was missing. Within minutes, he was pedaling his bike like a madman, chasing after J22 as it vanished toward the countryside. Tracking the steamroller wasn't hard. Flattened hedges, squashed lampposts, and one particularly unfortunate telephone booth stretched into a 50-yard-long metal pancake marked its path. By sunrise, Bert found himself panting on even more, the heat already sweltering. Just as he caught his breath, a police car screeched to a halt beside him, the mayor peering out from the backseat. "What in blazes is going on?" the mayor demanded. "Half the town's in chaos. Seen that rogue steamroller?" Bert wiped his brow. "Not lately, but it was headed this way." Chief Inspector Jones, gripping the wheel, shook his head. "Stealing heavy machinery, that's a new one. Hop in, Bert." As they sped off, the mayor rubbed his temples. "Here's the odd part. Witnesses swear there wasn't a soul driving the thing." Bert frowned. "Even stranger, it barely had any coal or water, should have conked out miles ago." But this was Gritcher, where the bazaar was just another Tuesday. No one batted an eye at magic or sentient machinery. She must have overheard the surveyor talking about scrapping her, Bert mused. Poor old girl took matters into her own wheels. Jones grimaced. Cute story, but what if she flattens someone next? The memory of that telephone booth lingered uncomfortably. Then, through the windswept moor, they spotted her, J-22, parked near a twisted grove of trees, using her water hose like a trunk to yank branches into her firebox. At the sight of them, she let out a defiant whistle and chugged deeper into the woods. Jones cleared his throat. Call me a chicken, but I'm not keen on wrestling a steamroller. Maybe we should call backup. An hour later, reports came in from Stoke Kangle. J-22 had bulldozed a coal yard's wall and helped herself to a ton of premium anthracite. The chase was far from over. The coal merchant was fuming. J-22 had playfully scooped him up with its hose and plopped him right onto his own rooftop. Meanwhile, up the road, the authorities finally cornered the runaway steamroller as it slurped water from a roadside pond. The chief inspector had brought in a heavy-duty tow truck with a crane, plus a convoy of equipment-laden trucks. Bert, watching the scene, felt a pang of sadness. "What's the plan now?" he muttered. PC Pedal stepped forward, gripping a heavy chain. "We'll loop this around her rear axle and haul her back to Blackberry," the chief inspector explained. Bert winced. "So that's it. J-22 gets scrapped after all these years." He shook his head, memories flooding back. "We paved every road in town when Blackberry was just a speck on the map. Remember Christmas '24? We hauled the bishop and his choir through 3 feet of snow for caroling." His voice cracked, and the mayor gave him a sympathetic pat. "Times change, Bert. Steam's outdated, but hey, you'll get first crack at driving the new diesel model." Bert shot him a sly grin. "Hooking J-22's axle won't be easy. Let me handle it, she trusts me." The chief hesitated but finally nodded. As Bert approached, J-22 let out a nervous chuff, but he soothed her with a pat on the wheel. "Easy, old girl." Then, before anyone could react, he vaulted into the cab, yanked a lever, and with a blast of steam and smoke, J-22 lurched forward. The crowd gaped as Bert's laughter rang out. Retirement. Not today. Steamrollers might be slow, but stopping one, nearly impossible. And honestly, nobody really tried. Together, they rumbled off even more, J-22 steering herself like she'd memorized the route. Bert barely had to lift a finger. She even paused obligingly when he needed sausages or tobacco. Perched on the firebox, frying his lunch, Bert hummed cheerfully. Destination, who cared? Back in Blackberry, the mayor rubbed his temples. "Technically, it's theft," he sighed. "But we're not pressing charges. Still, someone should stop them for Bert's safety." The chief inspector traced their path on the map. "Northbound, by afternoon they'll be rolling straight through Dooley." He paused, then added dryly, "assuming they don't pick up any more passengers." The situation seemed hopeless. How do you stop an unstoppable force like a steamroller? "Easy," the mayor declared. "We fight fire with fire. Dooley just got one of those fancy diesel rollers. Park that beast across the road and that'll put an end to this nonsense." When J-22 rumbled into Dooley, Bert spotted the massive green diesel roller blocking the way, its sheer weight unmistakable. Behind it stood the mayor and a crowd of nervous onlookers. Bert yanked the brake lever, but J-22 only hissed to a stop inches from the diesel. "All right, Bert, you've proved your point," the mayor called out. "Now be a decent fellow and step down, will you?" But before anyone could react, J-22 lurched forward. Crash. The impact rattled every bolt in Bert's machine. The diesel's driver sneered, clearly confident his hulking roller wouldn't budge. In fact, J-22 was being shoved backward. Then, with 3 sharp blasts of her whistle, something strange happened. The diesel suddenly halted, whistled back, and to everyone's shock began reversing on its own. "Since when do steamrollers take orders?" Someone muttered as J-22 revved up and rolled past, forcing the mayor to dive out of the way. The crowd gave chase, but J22, though slow, had a head start. Ahead loomed towering iron gates, thankfully wide open, leading to a grand estate. Inside, the sight was unbelievable. Rows of gleaming steamrollers, from massive red beasts to ornate showmen's engines, all puffing steam. The air smelled of oil and polished brass. A sharply dressed man, Lord Hugh of Dooley, rushed over, adjusting his glasses as he marveled at J22. "My word!" he exclaimed. A double-cylinder brass-boilered J-model from Snobbutt and Munchapple. Absolutely pristine. Bert blinked. "You know your rollers," Lord Hugh grinned, shaking his hand. "This is my steam engine museum, opens tomorrow. This beauty would be the crown jewel of my collection. Name your price." Before Bert could answer, the mayor and the mob arrived, all shouting at once. Lord Hugh ushered everyone inside, where they enjoyed a generous spread of fresh strawberries and whipped cream. By the time tea was over, the mayor found himself clutching a surprisingly hefty check, enough to finally purchase that diesel roller BlackBerry had been needing. Meanwhile, J22 was already being towed off to Lord Hugh's private workshop for a full restoration. "The real issue," Lord Hugh admitted with a sigh, "is that skilled steamroller mechanics are nearly impossible to find these days. I've been searching for a lead engineer for ages." Bert, ever the humble type, hesitated for just a second before clearing his throat. "Well now." And just like that, he was handed a crisp new uniform and the job of a lifetime. The others left in high spirits, though slightly baffled by how smoothly it had all unfolded. Before turning in for the night, Bert made a quick detour to check on J22. The old steamroller sat proudly among a row of others in the massive workshop, looking right at home. With a satisfied grin, Bert gave it a pat and murmured, "Sleep tight," before clicking the door shut behind him. Meanwhile, over in a cramped little house on the other side of town, Rupert Rist was facing a domestic crisis. His wife had her heart set on a brand new television, but Rupert's paycheck as a junior joke writer for a Matchbox label company wasn't exactly rolling in the big bucks. "I'm sick of sneaking over to Mrs. Jones's every time there's a decent show on," she grumbled. Then one fateful morning, Rupert spotted a tiny ad in the newspaper. "Earn extra cash in your free time. Turn spare hours into serious." Feeling equal parts hopeful and ridiculous, he mailed off $1 for more details and promptly forgot about it until a mysterious package arrived a week later. Inside, a single seed and a slip of paper that read, "Plant in damp soil." "You've been swindled," his wife declared when he showed her, but Rupert wasn't so sure. The ad promised big returns for minimal effort. Why would they lie? He reasoned, planting it near the compost heap. "Just pray it doesn't turn into one of those killer vines like in that horror flick we watched," she muttered. Days passed with no sign of life, just weeds mocking his optimism. Then one evening, as Rupert wandered through his cabbage patch admiring the sunset, a faint rustling stopped him in his tracks. The seed had sprouted. A wiry green shoot swayed above the dirt, unfurling another leaf before his eyes, growing an inch right then and there. "Rita, get out here," he yelled. By the time his wife rushed over, the plant had shot up to 3 feet, its leaves spreading like wildfire. A strange, crackling sound filled the air like someone crumpling gift wrap. "I don't trust this thing," Rita said, backing away. "It's got that creepy vibe. Next thing you know, it'll be stomping through downtown, knocking over skyscrapers." Rupert puffed on his pipe, squinting at the bizarre growth. "Yeah, but how do we profit from it?" Rupert had a coworker whose brother turned a tidy profit growing mushrooms in his basement or selling fresh-cut flowers. "Maybe we could try that," he muttered, eyeing the strange plant in their yard. But this thing wasn't just a plant anymore. It had shot up 10 feet overnight, its trunk thickening before sprouting a wild tangle of branches. By midnight, the Rists were standing beneath what looked like a full-grown tree. "Apples, pears, maybe even peaches," Rupert mused, rubbing his chin. Rita shot him a skeptical look. If we wake up dead tomorrow, don't say I didn't warn you." Neither of them slept much, lying awake as faint crackling sounds drifted in from the garden. Finally, Rupert threw off the covers and yanked open the window. Moonlight spilled over the tree, now covered in enormous, glowing blossoms. "Well, cut flowers it is," he muttered. "At least they're pretty. Maybe the florist down the street will take 'em." The scent of the flowers filled the room as he climbed back into bed, strange, not floral at all, more like banks, like crisp dollar bills and polished marble floors. He drifted off, puzzled. By morning, the tree jingled softly in the breeze, its branches sagging under the weight of something. Rupert shuffled outside in his robe just as something smacked him on the head. Another gust, and suddenly the air was full of falling coins. Pennies, nickels, even a few shiny 50-cent pieces. "Money," he wheezed, collapsing onto the grass. "I'll be damned." He dragged Rita outside, knee-deep in loose change. Sure, most of it was copper, speckled and dull, but money was money. That day, Rupert skipped work to count his haul, pound 20, 13 already. The next morning, another 25 pounds dangled from the branches. "Shame there's not more silver," Rita grumbled. "Hauling all this to the bank's gonna be a pain." Rupert puffed on a cigar, thoughtful. "You know, with marrows, you feed 'em to make 'em bigger. Fertilizer, manure. Maybe we should try it." So he dumped a bottle of Supergrow plant boost around the roots. The next day the tree rained down shiny 5-pence coins and one wrinkled, damp 1-pound note. "Progress," Rupert grinned. Still, bending over for nickels all day isn't exactly glamorous. That evening he went all in, 2 bottles of Supergrow and a wheelbarrow of manure. The next harvest, mostly 50-pence pieces, though some looked a little scrawny. A few smudged pound notes fluttered down. Rita crossed her arms. "Maybe we should quit while we're ahead." But Rupert just smirked, already eyeing the next miracle fertilizer on the shelf. Rita shook her head. "You might be pushing it too far with all that fertilizer," she cautioned. But Rupert was determined. "Listen, I'm not greedy. Just one solid harvest of 5s, that's all I'm asking. After that, it can go back to spitting out pennies for all I care." He grabbed an old metal wash tub, tossing in a bizarre cocktail of 27 different plant nutrients. As he climbed into bed that night, he grinned to himself. That ought to do the trick. The money tree spent the night trembling like it was caught in a hurricane. By dawn, all that remained was a sad, shriveled stump with a single charred branch dangling a tarnished penny. The wrist stared in defeat until the coin dropped with a pathetic clink. "So much for my get-rich-quick scheme," Rupert muttered. "Wonder if the old job at the hardware store's still open." He fired off a letter to the company that sold him the money tree kit. Their reply dripped with sarcasm. "Congratulations, genius. You bought a mushroom grower. If we knew how to print cash, you think we'd be peddling fungi." With their last few bucks, the wrist splurged on a second-hand TV. Defeated, Rupert planted the final penny in the backyard. A week later, while wrestling with his unruly dahlias, he spotted a tiny sprout. The knee-high plant bloomed 2 delicate daisies that smelled like honey, then promptly withered. Rupert exhaled hard, grabbed the mower, and took out his frustration on the lawn. At least that obeyed him. The Blackberry incident past midnight. Officer Ronald Biddle of the Gritcher PD was making his rounds through Blackberry's fog-draped streets when an odd whistling cut through the silence. "Well, well, well," he muttered, squinting at the icy sky. A crimson dot pulsed among the stars, growing larger. "Fireworks in January." The whistle became a shriek. Or maybe a plane in trouble. Flames erupted around the dot as it rocketed toward Grumble's wood. Crash. Windows rattled. A shower of dust rained from shelves across town. Bats tumbled from the church tower and the clock chimed 17 times. The woods glowed like a bonfire. Biddle pedaled his bike like a man possessed, dodging falling branches. By the time he reached the crater, most of Grumble's wood was a smoldering pit. Through the smoke, something metallic gleamed at the bottom. He barely had time to gawk before the click of his bike lock snapping made him whirl around. "Hey!" he roared, but the thief was already vanishing into the fog. Dawn brought snow and chaos. Police cars and a University Land Rover crowded the crater's edge. Whatever had fallen from the sky, it sure wasn't fireworks. Astronomers worldwide had spotted the bizarre object before it crash-landed in Grumble's Wood, leaving Chief Inspector William Jones scratching his head. "Imagine traveling light years just to end up here," he muttered, eyeing the still glowing wreckage with its strange markings. "By the way, Doctor, what exactly do you teach at the university, Doctor?" Jasper Blott adjusted his glasses. "Knitting and home economics, actually. The science department was empty, so they sent me, still not sure why." The scorched object in the crater looked straight out of a sci-fi flick. "Ever see the ghastly thing from Dr. Death's horror plane?" Jones mused. "This reminds me of that, some alien creature busting out and devouring, well, never mind. Point is, I'm locking my greenhouse tonight." "You think whatever landed here swiped PC Biddle's bike?" Before Blott could respond, Jones's police radio crackled to life. "Sir, we've got a situation on East Slate Road. Something broke into a produce shop. You'll want to see this." The scene was bizarre. Shattered glass, missing cabbages, and a trail of enormous footprints stamped into the snow. Each one was spaced yards apart, as if whatever made them had taken massive strides. Jones groaned. "Oh, this is just fantastic." The police spent the day tracking the prints until they vanished near Blackberry Common. By morning, headlines screamed about extraterrestrial horrors, though the Blackberry Gazette played it cool with "Giant footprints baffle authorities." Calls flooded the station. Reports of green men, purple figures, even a giant blue spider. Jones scoffed. "A spider riding a bike, doubtful." Then came Mrs. Edna Bucket's frantic call about a hairy beast vaulting her fence as she hung laundry. Jones brought Blott in. "First solid description we've got. Big, furry, long ears, one leg and a tail." Blott rubbed his chin. "And a taste for cabbages. Maybe it's from a low-gravity planet overrun with veggies." That night, something massive and shaggy barreled down an alley, sending a cop's helmet spinning. By dawn, the military rolled in, prodding the wreckage in Grumble's Wood while experts debated just what, or who, had come crashing to earth. A swarm of reporters from London descended on the scene that afternoon, just as Officer Biddle stumbled upon his missing bicycle. It was propped against a fence along his usual patrol route, with none other than Soapy Fred, Blackberry's most notorious poacher, hunched over, pumping air into the flat tire. "Well, well," Biddle said in his best official tone, crossing his arms, "if it isn't Soapy Fred himself." Fred straightened up, spotting the glimmer of suspicion in the officer's eyes. "All right, Ron, I took it," he admitted with a shrug. "Needed a quick escape from that blasted wood." "Grumble's Wood," Biddle frowned. "What were you doing there, birdwatching?" "Something like that," Fred muttered. "Then that thing crashed down not a stone's throw away." Biddle scratched his chin thoughtfully. "So what exactly is this thing causing all the fuss?" Meanwhile, soldiers patrolling Blackberry had uncovered more massive footprints in the snow, leading straight to the dense thickets on Blackberry Common. Within minutes, the area was swarming with tanks and armed troops. At the same time, a frantic woman burst into the tiny police station in East Slate, 10 miles away. "I run the Sick Performing Animals Retirement Home on Grubbs Lane," she blurted out, wringing her hands. "One of our residents is missing. I've searched everywhere." The officer licked the tip of his pencil. "And what kind of animal are we talking about?" "It must have been that awful explosion near Blackberry the other night, scared him half to death. He leaped clean over the wall," she explained. "He's a kangaroo, name's Bobo. Poor dear only has one leg, lost it in an accident when he was just a joey." The constable's eyes widened. "Hold on, ma'am. I think I'd better make a call." An hour later, the woman emerged from the bushes on Blackberry Common, gently tugging a dejected, one-legged kangaroo by a makeshift leash. Without a word, the soldiers and onlookers exchanged awkward glances before quietly dispersing. Back in Grumble's wood, under the cover of darkness, a bizarre, purple-skinned creature with 3 eyes and writhing tentacles slithered down from the tree it had been hiding in. It crept toward the strange metallic globe lodged in the crater, pressing a series of hidden nodules until a hatch hissed open. "Note to self," it grumbled, climbing inside. "Never vacation here again. These humans are completely unhinged." With a mechanical hum, the small, spherical ship lifted from the woods just as dawn broke, vanishing into the clouds without a trace. Mr. Brown's holiday mishap. It was a perfect summer morning, or at least it should have been. John Brown was finally on vacation, or so he thought, until he found himself trapped in bumper-to-bumper traffic halfway to the coast. 2 whole weeks without dealing with trouser, middling, and fedge, he grumbled, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. And here I am, wasting it in this glorious parking lot. Then, in a moment of reckless frustration, he did something completely out of character. He swerved off the main road and onto a narrow, tree-lined side street. Normally, he'd never dare risk getting lost, but today he'd had enough. Little did he know, that impulsive detour was about to turn his peaceful holiday into anything but relaxing. The morning sun shone bright as birds chirped in the blossoming trees, and John Brown's car hummed happily along the quiet country road, until a sudden jolt sent everything sideways. A sickening crunch echoed as his bumper collided with something invisible. When the dust settled, the picturesque orchards and rolling hills had vanished. Instead, his car sat in the middle of a vast concrete lot, surrounded by stacks of lumber, blinding stage lights, and frantic workers in blue jumpsuits sprinting toward him. John blinked. 1 second he was driving through open countryside. The next, he was staring at a massive painted backdrop, stretching endlessly in either direction. The sky, the trees, even the distant mountains, all just a giant canvas. "What in the world?" he muttered, fumbling for reverse. But before he could escape, a dozen hands yanked him from the car. Dragged into a cluttered wooden shack, John found himself face to face with a harried man drowning in paperwork. "Honestly, why can't folks just stick to the script?" the man groaned, rubbing his temples. "You're John Brown, right? Off on vacation. Well, congratulations, you just crashed through our fake countryside." "Fake?" John sputtered. "You think Mother Nature just happened to arrange all this?" The man Snigsley, as he introduced himself, waved a hand at the maps plastering the walls. "We paint what people expect to see, cheaper than growing real trees everywhere." Just then a panicked worker burst in. "Sir, the vicar from St. Knots is wandering toward Hangman's Wood." Snigsley paled. "Oh no, we replaced that set with a Buttercup Meadow last week." Grabbing John's arm, he bolted outside, where a crew truck screeched to a halt. They piled in, speeding past towering stacks of old props and tangled cables. "See," Snigsley shouted over the engine's roar. "Why build a whole forest when most people only glance at the trees by the path? The rest, cardboard and paint." John gripped the seat as the truck swerved, realizing the world around him might be just as flimsy. "You call this a countryside? There hasn't been anything resembling actual nature here for the last 2 centuries, Snigsley muttered as their truck rolled past a perfectly arranged pile of fake cardboard hills. Brown blinked in confusion. "Wait, why would they get rid of real scenery?" "Budget cuts," Snigsley groaned, rubbing his temples. "Management decided we should only use the bare minimum. So now we're stuck hauling around plastic trees, foam mountains, and those ridiculous fake sheep all day just so you actors don't notice the giant empty patches." "Actors?" Brown sputtered. "I'm not an actor, I'm a certified public accountant." Yeah, that's your role. You play a CPA, but something glitched and now you're backstage. Probably the prompter's fault, honestly. How are we supposed to keep up with their ridiculous demands?" Brown's head spun. "Who's they? And if I'm in a play, what's it even about?" Snigsley sighed. "They are the suits upstairs, and the play. Oh, just a little production called The Entire History of Earth in 3.9 quintillion acts plus a coffee break. The truck screeched to a halt and the crew scrambled out. Snigsley grabbed a megaphone, barking orders like a drill sergeant. The vicar's supposed to be inside, not wandering around. Somebody messed up the script again. All right, move those trees. Clompers, toss some dead leaves faster. Ferns, where are the ferns? Cue the bird song. Blimpo, more moss over there. Path, puddles, flowers, bees, and somebody stick that squirrel in a tree. Now clear out. Here comes the next scene. Before Brown's eyes, the barren backlot transformed. Soil spread, trees sprouted, birds chirped, and a cheerful vicar strolled by, oblivious to the chaos behind him. The second he passed, the set vanished again. Snigsley wiped sweat off his forehead. Too close. One of these days, some poor actor's gonna turn a corner and find nothing but a couple of guys eating sandwiches. All right, pack it up, boys. Brown hesitated. What about me? You. The writers will figure it out. Go through that door. He pointed to a lone door standing in the middle of nowhere. Brown frowned. It doesn't even lead anywhere. I can see right behind it. Fine, don't believe me, Snigsley grumbled. I'm just the guy who gets yelled at. Go bother someone else. Shrugging, Brown circled the door, then pushed it open. Light flashed, and suddenly he was in an endless brown and cream hallway lined with doors. A messy sign on one read, Scriptwriters, Corridor 1, Room 1. Taking a deep breath, he knocked. A tired voice called out, Yeah, come in. Inside, a frazzled little man hunched over a typewriter barely glanced up. The air in the room was thick with cigarette smoke, and crumpled papers littered the floor like fallen leaves. Brown hesitated before speaking. Excuse me, I need to get back into the play. Brown, is it? Speak up, man, don't whisper, a voice snapped. Wrong hallway, go left at the end. Absolute fool, I swear. Brown shut the door softly and wandered down the endless corridor. Hours passed before he finally turned left, only to find himself facing another identical hallway. Eventually, he spotted a door with his name, except there were thousands of them, all identical. By sheer luck, he stopped at one labeled, John Trevor Brown, 29, Certified Public Accountant. 12 Windmill Lane, Blackberry, Scriptwriters, Pickle, Muffin, and Crumpet. No way I'm knocking, he muttered, shoving the door open. Inside, the trio huddled around a typewriter, laughing as Muffin tapped out a scene. Perfect, we've got him on the beach, Muffin said. How about his swim trunk slipping, or maybe his umbrella flips inside out? Better yet, he buys a snow cone and immediately drops it in the sand, Pickle suggested. Genius, pure comedy gold, Crumpet cackled. Brown cleared his throat. They spun around. Hooray you, Muffin demanded. The guy whose name's on the door, Brown shot back. And you three must be the geniuses scripting my life. Crumpet lunged forward, shaking his hand like an overexcited fan. Unbelievable. I've been writing your story for years, Mr. Brown. But how'd you even get here? Took a wrong turn behind the set, Brown grumbled. I was supposed to be on vacation, and let me tell you, your comedy sounds miserable. Oh, it's hilarious, Muffin insisted. Audiences eat it up. You're a riot even if we do say so ourselves. But there's billions of people. How would they even watch me? They just do, Pickle cut in nervously. Wow, an actor backstage. Never thought we'd see the day. Brown crossed his arms. I'm not thrilled with my role. Feels more like a punchline than a leading man. Nonsense, it's art, Pickle said, just as a lime-green phone buried under papers rang. He answered, then paled. Why, yes, sir, he's here. Understood, we'll send him right up. Hanging up, he gulped. That was the director, wants you in his office. You're either getting promoted or fired. Good luck, Brown scoffed. Let him try. I'm done with this nonsense. I want out. Bye-bye, they chimed in unison. A blue flash erupted, thunder cracked, and suddenly Brown was sprawled on a plush crimson carpet so deep it swallowed his ankles. The office stretched endlessly, walls fading into haze. New detail. As he struggled to stand, he noticed a tiny nameplate on the desk, property of the director, etched in glowing letters. The air smelled faintly of burnt popcorn, adding to the surreal dread creeping up his spine. John Brown found himself staring at a massive desk that seemed impossibly far across the room, like something out of a surreal dream. Behind it lounged a burly man in a navy suit, sunglasses perched on his nose, feet propped up while he puffed on a cigar and flipped through a newspaper. Brown waited, shifting his weight before clearing his throat loudly. The director barely glanced up. "Oh, it's you," he muttered, lowering the paper just enough to peer over it. "Want a smoke? Honestly, you actors always stirring up drama. What's the problem this time?" Brown explained everything, how he'd somehow crashed through the set, how none of this made sense. The director exhaled a slow stream of smoke. "Through the scenery, huh? Not your fault, I suppose. But here's the real question, Brown. What do we do with you now?" "Just send me back," Brown insisted. "Back to my car, stuck in gridlock where I belong. I want to forget any of this ever happened." The director smirked, tapping his cigar. "Fine, but it'll take some tweaks to the script." Abracabazama. A blinding blue flash later, Brown blinked as the world reshaped around him. Now he stood beside the director on a towering platform, staring down at the most enormous library imaginable. Endless rows of towering shelves crawling with tiny workers, miniature trains zipping between them stacked high with books. "Impressive, isn't it?" The director grinned. "Every word ever spoken, written, or even thought is stored here. From the first caveman's grunt to, well, the very last words ever uttered. Spoilers, obviously." He grabbed a megaphone. "Attention. Fetch me the script for character 40,908,775,821,001. A frazzled librarian scurried over, dragging a cart loaded with books. The director flipped open a worn volume, its pages dog-eared with a red ribbon marking a section. "Ah, here we go. If we plop you back in your car just before you took that wrong turn, everything should sort itself out." A nervous stagehand interrupted. "Sir, the producer's on the line." "Be right back," the director muttered, vanishing. The second he was gone, Brown snatched the book. His own life story sprawled across the pages right up to this very moment. Even as he read, fresh ink bloomed on the next blank line. Brown grabs the book, starts reading. A grin spread across his face. "Let's make some improvements." He scribbled furiously. Suddenly he was a lottery winner, a treasure hunter, an Olympic champion, living to nearly 200. Too simple. Then inspiration struck. His smile turned sly. This could be fun. John Brown scribbled carefully in his notebook. While inside the script room, he now has access to the speeches of the president, the prime minister, every major world leader. And for some reason, Fitzborough Robinson, head clerk at Trouser, Middling and Fedge, the dull accounting firm where Brown currently wastes his days. Instantly, 20 massive leather-bound books materialized beside him. He scribbled a quick addition into each one, barely managing to slide them back onto the shelves before the director burst back in. "It's done," the man announced, clapping his hands. Blazon Caraba. One blink later, Brown was behind the wheel of his car, stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic. The radio crackled to life and the announcer's voice blared. "Breaking news. World leaders are spontaneously leaping up and down, chanting, 'Long live John Brown, the greatest man alive.'" Even a senior clerk from Gritcher joined in. "Authorities are baffled," Brown smirked. "Well, that ought to shake things up," he muttered, drumming his fingers on the wheel. Mission accomplished. Pilgarlic Towers, perched in the mist-shrouded even hills in the dreariest corner of Gritcher, loomed the decaying wreck of Pilgarlic Towers. Ivy choked the walls, moss smothered the ivy, and sickly yellow mushrooms sprouted from every crevice. The place was so unnerving that even bats steered clear, and owls muffled their hoots in fear. One gloomy afternoon, a nervous man pedaled up to the rusted gates on a squeaky bicycle, slapped up a notice, and bolted like his life depended on it. The sign read, "Town and Country Nuisances Act, 1871. This property, Pilgarlic Towers, is hereby condemned under Section 83BA2, 1877, amended for demolition to make way for a new highway. Frankly, it's about time. Signed, Gritcher County Council, who were strong-armed into this by the Ministry of Nuisances. That night, a spectral white hand slithered through the bars, snatched the notice, and vanished. Inside the drafty, cobwebbed hall, the resident ghosts were in an uproar. "By my rattling bones, this is an outrage," bellowed Sir Rufus Grew, the headless terror, adjusting his tucked-under skull for emphasis. "3 centuries I've haunted these halls," wailed the screaming monk, a ghostly tear splashing onto the floor. "All I wanted was a damp little crypt and maybe a friendly spider or two." Cedric the mad executioner rolled his glowing eyes. "Face it, mates, we're done for." Lady Jane Black, ever practical, offered the monk her translucent sleeve as a handkerchief. "Crying won't help. What's the plan?" Sir Rufus scratched his chin, or where it would have been. "What is a motorway, anyway?" Ronald Fitzgibbon, the spectral coachman who haunted the grounds with his phantom carriage, piped up. "It's a massive road for those noisy metal contraptions. No horses, just fumes and honking." The monk sniffled. "But my spiders," ignoring him, Sir Rufus mused, "couldn't we just haunt the highway instead?" New detail. The ghosts briefly debate sabotaging construction crews by rearranging road signs into cryptic warnings before realizing they'd need opposable thumbs. "Pedestrians aren't allowed here," Ronald muttered, glancing at the speeding cars. "And even if they were, those drivers wouldn't see a thing. They're moving way too fast." Meanwhile, the monk sniffled, mumbling something about adding a few toads to make the place feel more welcoming. Sir Rufus stroked his spectral beard, deep in thought. "I've got a plan," he announced. "If the Ministry of Nuisances insists on tearing down our home, they'd better give us a new one. We're taking this fight to London." A week later, the quiet village of Pilgarlic Parva was shaken awake as the phantom stagecoach thundered down its empty streets. Every ghost was aboard, except Septimus the dreadful black dog, who raced behind, howling like a banshee. Inside, the spectral passengers belted out on Ilk Lamore Bot, with drunken enthusiasm, their ghostly luggage wobbling precariously on the roof. The moon vanished behind ragged clouds as the coach veered onto the main road, sparks flying, blue flames hissing around its wheels. "Are you certain you know the way to London?" Sir Rufus bellowed over the chaos. "Of course," Ronald shot back. "I practically lived there." Lady Jane Black suddenly leaned out the window, her ghostly hair whipping in the wind. "There's some sort of horseless contraption chasing us with a flashing blue light." Ronald's eyes widened. "Blimey, the coppers!" He cracked his whip, urging the ghostly horses faster. The police car gave chase for miles until, in a desperate move, Ronald steered the coach straight through a hedge, a haystack, 5 bewildered cows, a lamppost, 2 cottages, and an entire orchard. Naturally, being ghosts, they passed through everything like a gust of wind. By dawn, the coach rolled into London, the eastern sky glowing pink. The ghosts pressed against the windows, gawking at the sights. "Westminster," Sir Rufus sighed nostalgically. "Ah, the memories. Did I ever tell you I was once an MP for Blackberry, back when politics was respectable before they let just anyone vote?" They screeched to a halt outside the Ministry of Nuisances, pouring through the revolving doors like a spectral mob. The building was disgustingly modern, no cobwebs, no dust, just sterile cleanliness. Sir Rufus shuddered. "Where is everyone?" Lady Jane smirked. "Probably just a skeleton crew this early." Sir Rufus brightened. "Ah, now that's more like it. I meant there are only a few living people here." "Oh," the ghosts scattered, wreaking havoc. Cedric the mad executioner yelped after zapping himself on an electric typewriter. The monk wailed, his fingers stuck in a filing cabinet. Ronald, ever the tinkerer, poked at a massive computer that took up 5 whole rooms. Meanwhile, Sir Rufus marched down the polished halls until he found a grand door labeled R.T. Hun. Richard Carpet, Minister for Nuisances, perfect, he thought, slipping through the keyhole. He waited impatiently until around 10:30, a self-important man finally strode in and settled behind his gleaming desk. With dramatic flair, Sir Rufus tucked his head under his arm and rose from the inkwell, moaning, "Ooh, ooh, ooh." The minister nearly fell out of his chair. The eerie silence of the haunted halls was shattered by Sir Rufus' dramatic cry. "The hour of doom creeps across these cursed grounds." Meanwhile, the minister barely glanced up from his desk, casually pressing the intercom. "Miss Fisher, bring me the bother's file, would you?" Sir Rufus scowled. "This is unacceptable. In my day, a single wail would send villagers fleeing for miles." Lady Jane Black shimmered into view on the windowsill, rolling her spectral eyes. "Face it, Rufus, modern folks don't believe in ghosts. I just spent 10 minutes floating through his secretary and she didn't even shiver." Cedric the mad executioner phased through the wall, his ghostly glow flickering. "We're Relic's old friend, nobody trembles at shadows anymore." Then Sir Rufus spotted it, the minister flipping through a document labeled Pilgarlic Tower's demolition order. "They're tearing us down," he bellowed. "We must act." Just then the intercom crackled. "Sir, the computer is malfunctioning," the minister sighed. "And this requires my attention because—" "It's, belting out obscene sea shanties, sir," the ghost gasped. "Ronald," Sir Rufus cheered. "He's possessed the machine." Downstairs, the computer had already typed out a scandalous ballad and was now reciting a bawdy joke from the 1700s. Soon chaos erupted. Filing cabinets locked shut, elevators went rogue, and the secretary for official nosiness found himself trapped in a lift that bounced him between floors like a ping-pong ball. A phone cord snaked out a window, lassoing the minister and dragging him onto a runaway T-cart. The computer screen flashed, "Stop the demolition or the chaos continues." "I can't," the minister wheezed. "The bulldozers are already there." Another phone hovered near as the computer typed, "Make the call." Trembling, he obeyed. Instantly, the madness ceased. Later, he'd blame stress, until the bulldozers suddenly turned on each other, ramming like angry goats. Soon after, Pilgarlic Towers was declared a historic landmark, sparing it from destruction. The ghosts celebrated, but haunting bureaucrats had lost its thrill. Maybe it was time for a new haunting strategy. Perhaps something involving Wi-Fi. Ever get that eerie feeling when your phone rings with no caller or your laptop glitches out for no reason? That's probably just Sir Rufus or the screaming monk messing around. Ghosts love a good prank. Now, picture this. Way back when dragons still roamed, and the coolest arcade game was a monochrome ping-pong table. A shady wizard named Grubble, the utterly untrustworthy, slunk into a dim, smoke-filled tavern in the cursed city of Morpork. Wizards and bars don't usually mix, mostly because they cheat at darts with magic. Grubble leaned over the counter and muttered to the bartender, "I need a sword for hire. Someone who can handle unspeakable horrors, battle faceless beasts, you know, the usual gig." The bartender nodded toward a hulking guy in the corner. "That one might suit ya." Grubble squinted. By the fireplace sat a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, wearing what could only be described as adventurer cosplay, all leather straps and zero practicality. "He any good?" Grubble asked skeptically. "Well," the bartender mused, "he just polished off 15 bags of pork rinds, a bucket of dragon spice cheese puffs, 10 pickled eggs, and a mystery meat pie I was using to hold down receipts." Grubble blinked. "Right. Just get me a cheap beer and a kitty lemonade with a cherry then." He sidled up to the brute and cut to the chase. "Name's Grubble, I'm in the market for a hero." The man extended a hand the size of a baseball mitt. "Kron," he grunted, then frowned like he was double-checking his own name. "Yeah, pretty sure it's Kron," Grubble grinned. "Perfect. I've got a lead on the 5 keys of Zag. Legend says they unlock a treasure unseen for centuries. Sound like fun?" Kron shrugged. "Neat. Congrats." Grubble groaned. No, you're supposed to say, not the fabled keys of Zag, the treasure beyond imagining. Wizard, I must join you for a modest 20% cut, of course. Kron scratched his head. Sure, whatever, I was free today anyway. Great, first stop's a cakewalk, just a witch who only knows food spells, literally a piece of cake. Kron opened his mouth to reply, Gondra Pistral, Grubble bellowed. With a pop, Kron vanished mid-sentence. Grubble dusted his hands. Best not let him think too hard, he muttered, slipping out the door. He'll handle the heavy lifting, I'll handle the swindling. Easy, guy's got the brains of a sack of hammers. Somewhere in the void, Kron's voice echoed. Wait a sec. New detail. The tavern's jukebox suddenly started playing an eerie tune on its own, probably Sir Rufus again. Kron barely had time to finish his thought before he found himself standing alone in the middle of a forest so dense and eerie that even the shadows seemed to whisper warnings. The trees towered like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. If this place had a map, it would have just been a sea of green with a tiny red dot labeled, Here lies Kron, probably not for long. He tightened his grip on his sword just as a voice yelled, Duck! Now most people would freeze like a deer in headlights, but Kron dove forward just in time. A spear sliced through the air where his head had been, embedding itself in a tree with a metallic hum. Something cackled from the underbrush before vanishing. What the heck was that? Kron muttered. Depends on your definition of that, came a dry, hollow voice right beside him. Kron turned to see an oak tree staring back at him literally, its bark twisted into something resembling a face. Also, mind pulling this spear out of my side, it's giving me splinters. You're a talking tree, Kron said, blinking. The oak groaned. Wow, sharp observation. Yes, the leaves, the bark, the whole rooted in one spot thing, definitely a tree. So Grubble sent you, huh? Kron frowned. How'd you know? The tree shrugged, an unsettling sight as its branches creaked. Third treasure hunter this week. Look, kid, Grubble's little portal trick is old news. The witch knows exactly where you'll pop in. She just waits here to skewer you or turn you into a toad or whatever strikes her fancy. Kron scowled. He didn't mention that part. Shocking, the tree deadpanned. Nobody signs up for certain doom in the fine print. Still, you're alive so far. Want directions to her place? Sure, Kron said. A gnarled branch lowered like an awkward elevator. Hop on, Tree Express, bumpy but efficient. What followed was the weirdest commute of Kron's life. The oak swung him to an ash which passed him to a beach, branches groaning under his weight. The ground blurred below as trees relayed him like some botanical bucket brigade. Watch out, a chestnut muttered as it handed him off. The witch's got this dog. Oh, she definitely had a dog. The beast stood nearly as tall as Kron, with two sets of gleaming teeth and a look that screamed lunchtime. Scattered bones and dented armor around the clearing told him he wasn't the first to try his luck. The dog sniffed the air, nostrils flaring. Kron crouched behind a bush, gripping his spear. It wasn't much against that, but then an idea sparked. Maybe he didn't need to fight it. Maybe he just needed to outsmart it. And if that failed... Well, at least the trees made decent hiding spots. The trees shuddered as Kron emerged from the underbrush, snapping his spear with a sharp crack over his knee. A twisted grin spread across his face as he gripped the broken halves. He's lost it completely, whispered a nearby holly bush, leaves trembling. Kron whistled sharply. See me, boy. The two-headed mutt hesitated. This wasn't part of its usual routine. With a slobbery snarl, both heads lunged forward, each desperate to sink teeth into him first. Then, with a dramatic flourish, Kron tossed the spear pieces in opposite directions and barked, Fetch! For a suspended second, the dog hung midair, its two minds pulling in opposite directions. Then, crack! The heads collided, sending the beast tumbling into a dazed heap. Kron didn't waste a second. He bolted toward the witch's cottage, slamming shoulder first into the wall, only to realize it wasn't wood or stone. It was gingerbread. The entire cottage was a sugar-coated nightmare. Chocolate shingles, licorice window frames, even a candy floss doorknocker. His hand stuck fast to the toffee-coated handle as the door creaked open. Works like a charm every time, cackled the witch, dragging him inside. That meddling wizard just won't quit, will he? Before Kron could react, a massive donut coiled around him, pinning his arms. The kitchen reeked of caramel and burnt sugar, no surprise given the witch's carb-heavy magic. Rows of cages lined the far wall, and she shoved him into one with a grunt. "Everyone's got opinions," she muttered. "Update your spells, ditch the sweets, try kale and quinoa. Pa, since when do witches care about nutrition?" "Total nonsense," Kron agreed, playing along. "Exactly," she snapped. "You curse their crops, turn their princes into frogs, and suddenly you're the villain, ungrateful lot." She eyed him hungrily. "You'll do nicely. A few weeks of my cooking and you'll be plump. You eat people." Kron blurted. "Occupational hazard," she said with a shrug before hobbling off. Alone, Kron scanned the room. A key dangled above a monstrous oven, the key of Zag, and in the next cage a scrawny troll groaned. "Hey, dude," it sighed. "How long you been in here?" Kron asked. "Too long," the troll grumbled. "Can't gain weight on this junk. Give me a nice bucket of snails and I'd chew through these bars in a day, but licorice," it gagged. Kron tested the cage. Thick, black, and sticky, just his luck. Trapped in a candy prison with a sugar-crazed witch and a hangry troll. Perfect. Kron's muscles burned as he ripped himself free from the sticky donut prison, lunging at the licorice bars with gnashing teeth. The troll watched, mildly impressed, as Kron devoured 3 whole bars before the witch stormed back in. She shrieked, summoning a suffocating wave of marshmallow, but Kron twisted free just in time. "Hey, buddy," the troll called out, scratching his scaly skin. "A little help. I'm turning into a raisin over here." Then chaos erupted. The gingerbread door exploded inward, and the witch's 2-headed hound charged at Kron, snarling. He swung a fist, grabbed his sword, sliced through the troll's cage, and snatched the key just as the witch hurled razor-edged barley sugars at him. "Whoa, bad dog," the troll yelled, wriggling free. "Anyone got condiments?" The beast bit down on the troll's legs. Big mistake. Troll hide was tougher than steel. With a roar, the troll bit back, and seconds later, both were gone in a blur of yelps and demands for seasoning. The witch had vanished too. Kron kicked through the wall just in time to see her broomstick vanishing into the treetops. He raised the key triumphantly. "All right, Grubble," he muttered. "Key S in hand, work your magic." A blink later, Kron found himself buried under a mountain of those cardboard boxes. He shoved one aside, hearing Grubble's muffled protest. "Hey, that's top-tier inventory." Light flooded in as the wizard cleared a path, revealing a cave cluttered with dusty spellbooks and mostly stacks of boxes. "Got the key." Grubble snatched it before Kron could react. "Perfect, now your next mission." "Hold on," Kron interrupted. "We need to talk." "No time," Grubble waved him off. "Gotta move this stock." Kron eyed the boxes skeptically. "What's in them?" "Lucky charms," Grubble grinned. "Got 'em dirt cheap, factory got zapped by lightning. Solid brass, barely tarnished. 3 gold each, fine too." "No, 1, but I'm practically robbing myself. Tell you what, buy 3, get a real love potion free. Best deal in the realm." "You just did," Kron deadpanned. Grubble groaned. "All this teleporting's draining my funds. Come on, take a few, barely any water damage from that mysterious flood after the fire. Hardly noticeable." "No," Kron said firmly. "These quests are getting too risky." "Barely a scratch," Grubble dismissed. "Now step into this circle." "Yeah," Kron muttered, realizing he'd lost control of the conversation entirely. Kron barely had time to protest before Grubble's magic sent him spinning into oblivion. Popping back into existence, he found himself shivering in a bizarre landscape, steam rising from cracks in the frozen ground, a massive volcano looming in the distance. "Not the warmest welcome," he muttered, rubbing his arms. "But since I'm here, might as well explore." Behind him, a dark cave yawned open, or was it south? Kron could never keep direction straight. Nearby, a peculiar rock caught his eye, etched with the cryptic phrase, "It snort hom." What in the world does that even mean? He wondered aloud. A faint groan answered him. Sword drawn, he crept around the rock and found a tiny, bound figure squirming in the dirt. "Help! For the love of moss, untie me!" the little man yelped. Kron, ever the scholar, flipped open his adventurer's guide to mythical beings. Beard, pointy hat gnome, maybe. Dwarves lie after lunch. Elves don't usually have beards this scraggly. "Oh, brilliant deduction," the gnome snapped. "Yes, I'm a gnome. Free me and I'll explain the rock." Once loose, the gnome dusted himself off. "It's a dwarven marker, misleading on purpose. They tied me up thinking I was after one of their hidden keys." "Were you?" Kron asked. The gnome's eyes darted away. "Me? No, all I know is, it's not under ice, whatever that means." Kron set off, blissfully unaware he was marching south. At a fork in the road, he let fate decide, flipping a coin before charging ahead. He skipped a path leading to a bubbling lake, opting instead for a shaky bridge where a mysterious black book lay. Picking it up, the book taunted, "Think you're going west, keys not on land. Think you're going east, keys not in water. Think you're north of pointy hills, joke's on you, it's west. Oh, and free advice, your boots are disgusting." Kron groaned. "These are hush dragons." "Do you know how much these cost?" He plopped onto a rock to scrape off the mud. Bad move. The stone was ice gold, and worse, a band of vengeful dwarves seized the moment to ambush him. One solid whack later, Kron realized two things. 1. Rocks are terrible chairs. 2. Dwarves really don't like uninvited guests. Kron groaned as he regained consciousness, his limbs tightly wrapped in what felt like twine. The dim glow of torchlight flickered across rough stone walls covered in intricate dwarven runes. He blinked, taking in his surroundings. A cavern deep within the rocky hills, clearly some kind of makeshift dwarven hideout. 16 scowling dwarves, none taller than his knee, surrounded him, their beards bristling with irritation. The 17th thing that caught his eye was an absurdly elaborate clock, its hands ominously inching toward midnight. "Oh, fantastic," Kron muttered, rolling his eyes. "This is going to be humiliating." "He's awake," one of the dwarves yelped. Kron flexed his arms, snapping the flimsy ropes like dry spaghetti. "See, the embarrassing part isn't that you captured me, it's that your rope-making skills are worse than a toddler's shoelace knot. If word gets out I had to fight a bunch of knee-high warriors, I'll never live it down at the guild." The lead dwarf, barely reaching Kron's shin, puffed out his chest. "And what's that supposed to mean?" Kron smirked. "Let's just say you lot wouldn't exactly qualify for a basketball team." "That's it, boys." The dwarf screeched. "Aim for the shins." Kron sighed as tiny fists pummeled his ankles like angry squirrels. With one effortless motion, he plucked the head dwarf off the ground by his belt buckle, dangling him midair like a misbehaving kitten. "Look, I don't usually rough up folks half my size, but you're testing my patience." "Where's the key?" The dwarf crossed his arms, sulking. "Fine, it's hidden in a cave." Bong. The clock struck 12, echoing through the cavern. "Huh," Kron mused. "Noon already. Time flies when you're being ambushed by garden gnomes." "And it's east of the 6 standing stones," the dwarf finished, smug. Kron's eyes lit up. "That's all I needed to hear." The moment his fingers closed around the second key of Zag, Grubble's spell yanked him backward in a dizzying whirl. He blinked. Was this the same cave? The cardboard boxes had vanished, replaced by a chaotic alchemy lab. Glass tubes coiled like snakes, bubbling with neon liquids that hissed as they dripped into jars. At the center of the madness sat Grubble, the unusually unreliable, slapping labels onto bottles with sticky fingers. "What happened to the lucky charms?" Kron asked, eyeing the mess. "Traded 'em to Scrobless the slightly shady for this sweet setup," Grubble said, licking a label marked "Extra Strength Love Potion May Cause Hiccups." Kron picked up a handful of labels. "Wait, Anti-Welsh TV Ointment. Guaranteed 100% artificial. This is just snake oil." Grubble grinned. "Call it what you want, pal. People pay 5 gold a pop. If that's not magic, I don't know what is." Kron groaned. "You're the worst." Grubble winked. "And yet business is booming." "So you've got the key, huh?" Kron hesitated before handing it over, his fingers lingering on the metal. Listen, about these little escapades of yours, they're not exactly safe, and I think we should discuss my pay. Grubble cut him off with a dramatic gasp. You don't trust me, that's just heartbreaking. Kron sighed. Oh, I trust you about as much as I trust a raccoon with my lunch, which is to say, not at all. Threepsnitz, the wizard bellowed, and just like that, Kron was gone. Grubble twirled the 2 keys in his hand, grinning. 3 more to go, he murmured. Then I'll be rolling in gold like a dragon in a treasure vault. Meanwhile, Kron suddenly found himself perched on a razor-thin ledge, halfway up a sheer cliff in the middle of a howling blizzard. Fantastic, he muttered, snowflakes stinging his face. Absolutely perfect. How exactly am I supposed to— Oh, never mind. The ledge was slick with ice, sloping outward like some cruel joke. Freezing water dripped down his collar, and just when he thought things couldn't get worse. Excuse me, Boom Boom, would you kindly step aside? Kron turned his head slowly so as not to plummet to his doom, and saw a tiny, bald man in a black robe, barefoot, with a giant red rubber nose strapped to his face. You must be joking, Kron groaned. Indeed, Boom Boom. Now if you just move. The monk strolled right past him, stepping onto thin air like it was solid ground before skipping off down the ledge. Kron swallowed hard. If he can do it. But his legs disagreed. By the time he reached the end of the ledge, the storm had cleared, revealing a breathtaking vista of snow-capped peaks and glittering glaciers, all of which were very far below him. The monk was already a speck in the distance, crossing a vast snowfield. Kron trudged after him, sinking knee-deep with every step. When he finally caught up, the monk was chatting with 2 mountain-sized guards, their arms thicker than tree trunks. My dog has no nose, the monk chirped. How does he smell? One guard rumbled. Awful, Boom Boom. The guards chuckled and waved him through. Kron, crouched behind a boulder, could only stare. Jokes. They live up here in the middle of nowhere and tell jokes. Then again, anything beat turning into a human icicle. Kron stepped forward, only to be blocked by the guards' crossed spears. His mind raced for something funny to say. He stammered. The guard stared blankly. Okay, what do you call a magical dog? He blurted. One guard tilted his head. A labracadabrador, Kron answered, forcing a chuckle. Boom Boom. The guards exchanged glances. Fine, Kron muttered. Ever hear the one about the guy who made a break for it? How's it go? A guard asked. Like this. Kron bolted past them, sprinting down the winding path until they were just specks behind him. Catching his breath, he took in the valley below, monks in red rubber noses tending gardens, herding goats, even the monastery itself capped with a giant red dome. Finally, he spotted the monk he'd been trailing. Where is this place? The monk grinned. Welcome to Shangri-La, Boom Boom. Wanna be a joke monk? Tell gags all day, rise through the ranks, think Alec Guinness but with way worse pay. Actually, I need the key. The monk yanked his arm. High Lama first. Boom Boom. Inside the monastery, the High Lama lounged on a throne equipped with a whoopee cushion, sporting a fez, plastic glasses with fake eyebrows, and the signature red nose. Here in Shangri-La, he announced, we've cracked the secret to longevity. I'm 200, jokes keep us young. Oh, and prophecy says once every joke's been told 9 billion times, poof, world ends and we all clock out. Neat, Kron said, but I'm here for the key of Zag. It's in the vault, the Lama replied. Prophecy says it goes to whoever tells us a new joke. Boom Boom. Piece of cake, Kron said. Good, the Lama nodded. Because when a comic bombs on stage, they say he dies. Up here, literal, Boom Boom. Kron's eyes darted to the spear-wielding guards. Their noses were silly, but their weapons weren't. Define literal. No laughs. First, 1,000-year-old custard pie to the face, Hugh. Then off the cliff, then we laugh. A monk shoved a red nose into Kron's hands. Ceremonial dress code. No exceptions. New detail. The throne's whoopee cushion lets out a squeak as the Lama shifts, making Kron jump. Tone shift. From tense to absurdly dark humor as the Lama casually describes execution by bad joke. The The deep clang of a gong echoed through the halls as guards ushered Kron and the High Lama into a sunlit courtyard. Thousands of robed monks sat in perfect rows, their faces lit with anticipation. At the center stood a wooden stage where a single monk barked out random numbers: 12, 345, 678, and the crowd erupted in hysterics. 867,530, he giggled, and the monks slapped their knees, tears streaming down their cheeks. Kron, still struggling with the oversized rubber nose muffling his voice, turned to the High Lama. "What kind of joke is this?" he grumbled. "Efficiency," the Lama beamed. "After centuries of laughter, we assign numbers to every joke. Saves time, monks hear the digits, remember the punchline, instant joy." With a sudden shove, he propelled Kron onto the stage. A screechy orchestra launched into what sounded like a trash can rolling down a staircase. The sea of monks leaned forward, not for Kron's wit, but for the inevitable moment when the ceremonial custard pie, aged 1,000 years and smelling like a dumpster behind a bakery, would splatter across his face. Kron hesitated, eyeing the pie's crust, which looked sharp enough to slice bread. Then it hit him. All jokes have numbers now. 199,874,390, he blurted. Silence. Then a single snicker. Then, like dominoes, the entire crowd collapsed into wheezing laughter. Seizing the moment, Kron yanked the High Lama's rubber nose to its elastic limit. "Hand over the key," he growled, "or I'll turn your face into a balloon animal." The Lama, gasping between giggles, waved him off. Take it, brilliant material." And as a bonus, he gestured to the rancid custard pie. Kron wasn't sticking around for dessert. He snatched the key and bolted, guards hot on his heels. He didn't slow at the valley's edge or even at the cliff. With a wild leap, he screamed, "Grubble, do something." A flash of light later, he was sprawled on the floor of Grubble's dim cave. The wizard barely glanced up from his cluttered desk. "Smooth trip," Kron ripped off the nose and baggy pants. "Worse than your cooking," he snapped. "But why bother complaining? You'll just zap me into another disaster." He tossed the third key onto Grubble's papers, sending calculations fluttering. Grubble squinted. "Quick math check, what's 8 times 3? 24, Kron deadpanned. "Unless your magic messed that up too." The wizard ignored him, scribbling shaky red lines across a star-charted parchment. "Fourth key's tricky," he muttered. "Hidden across time, needs precision, tremblite, nothing. Troblode." Purple sparks shot from Kron's ears. A sickly green glow haloed his head as his knees buckled. "Oh, fantastic," he groaned. "More wizardry, more wobbling. Hold on, almost there, Triblofen." Kron disappeared in an instant. Grubble scooped up the 3 keys with a smug grin. "Just 2 more to find, 888, still doesn't feel right." Meanwhile, Kron tumbled through a chaotic void, nothing like the usual magic he knew. The darkness screeched with eerie noises, blinding flashes of light exploding around him. Then, with a final blue burst, he landed hard in a cramped, musty space that reeked of lemon-scented polish. His fingers brushed against something wooden, a mop handle, which toppled over with a loud clatter. Before he could react, something slick and rope-like slithered around his neck. Panicked, Kron yanked his sword free and slashed wildly at the darkness. He stumbled back, crashing into a door that swung open, sending him tumbling into a hallway. A cascade of cleaning supplies, old shoes, and the mysterious snake, which turned out to be a vacuum hose, spilled after him. Just to be safe, he gave the hose a few extra whacks before bolting down the dimly lit corridor. The next room was a maze of white metal boxes. Heart racing, Kron tugged at the nearest handle, only to be blasted by icy air. Who stores food in a freezing cave? He muttered, eyeing a nearly whole roast chicken. Hunger won out, and he tore into it while cautiously exploring. A large black box with glowing red rings caught his attention. Poking at its knobs, he recoiled as the room erupted with shrieking, wailing noises. "Demons!" he gasped, frantically jabbing at the controls. The voices inside only grew louder, trapped souls, surely. With a mighty swing, he smashed the radio to pieces, sparks flying. No tiny prisoners inside. Then light flooded the room. Mom. There's a sword guy in the kitchen and he just murdered the radio. A small boy in blue pajamas stood in the doorway, unimpressed. You totally wrecked our vacuum. Did you like crash land here in a UFO or something? Like in that movie, Bing Bong Bing Bang Bong. Kron staggered back, accidentally slamming his hand onto the scorching stovetop. Yow, you're way uglier than it, the kid remarked casually. Desperate, Kron stumbled backward, right into the washing machine which roared to life, churning violently. With a final shriek, he leaped onto the counter and hurled himself through the window, vanishing into the night. Kron barely registered the shouts chasing him as he sprinted across a patch of grass and vaulted over a chain-link fence. But his relief was short-lived. The narrow street ahead was lined with flickering streetlights and something monstrous, what had to be a dragon, was barreling toward him with a deafening growl. At least this was familiar. Sure, the beast was oddly shaped with two blinding eyes, but Kron had faced worse. He planted himself in its path, gripping his sword. The dragon screeched to a halt, belching hot air, and just as it loomed over him, Kron swung. His blade struck right between those glowing eyes. Steam hissed, the lights died, and the beast shuddered to a stop. A tiny voice piped up behind him. You just killed a truck. Kron turned to see the kid from earlier, now wrapped in a bathrobe over his pajamas, watching with fascination. A door on the dragon's side burst open and a furious little man stormed out. My mom called the cops, the boy added helpfully. Also, why aren't you green like the Hulk? The truck driver cracked his knuckles. Kron yanked at his sword, stuck fast, then bolted. He didn't stop running until he'd put half the neighborhood behind him. Grubble, he growled. When I find you, I'm turning your skull into a drinking cup. More dragons, smaller, louder, zipped up and down the road. A massive one soared overhead, flashing blinding lights and roaring like thunder. The world was chaos, noise, lights, and a gnawing hunger twisting his gut. Then a scent. Savory, salty, irresistible. Across the street, a glowing sign beckoned. Fish in, chips to go. Kron had no clue what fish and chips were, but his stomach overruled his confusion. He shoved the door open, startling the shop owner, though not as much as the guy waving a gun at the cash register. The thief spun, aiming the metal contraption at Kron, who just blinked. This was what stood between him and that glorious smell. Kron decked him with one swing. Cheers erupted as people crawled out from under tables. Kron ignored them, slamming his fist on the counter. Fish and chip, now. Better give it to him, chirped the kid suddenly beside him. He's like Thor or something, Kron sighed. Of course the boy had followed him. And get me cod with double fries, the kid added, grinning. The shop owner, now more amused than terrified, waved a hand. On the house hero discount. As the crowd swarmed Kron, clapping his back, the would-be robber snored peacefully on the floor. Kron grabbed a fry, sniffed it, and took a bite. His eyes widened. This was a battle worth fighting. Kron plopped down at the table and devoured mountains of fried fish, a lake of mushy peas, every last sausage in the joint, and enough fries to construct a slippery replica of the Empire State Building. Across from him, the kid in the bathrobe grinned like he'd just won the lottery. Clearly, he'd decided Kron was his new favorite stray. Just then, a police cruiser with flashing lights screeched to a halt outside. Kron's stomach dropped. Trouble. And he still hadn't found the stupid key. Home felt impossibly far away. He could have sobbed right there. Maybe you should, exit stage left, the kid whispered, tugging Kron's sleeve. Cops might not vibe with the whole stolen truck thing. Then flash everything went black. Kron tumbled through the void, no key, just streaks of neon light pulsing around him like a cosmic rave. Somewhere behind him, the kid's voice piped up. Yo, is this a laser show or what? Next thing he knew, Kron was back in Grubble's cave, where the wizard was dousing a sad-looking broomstick with woodworm spray. A garish tag dangled from it, Steel of the Week, barely used, only flown by a sweet old lady on Halloween. With a faint pop, the bathrobe kid materialized beside Kron. Grubble jerked back, spraying his own sleeve. "What in the—" "He kinda followed me," Kron groaned. "Pretty sure he's magic too. That place was crawling with weirdos, you've got no clue." Grubble cleared his throat. No need to panic, young man." "Not panicking," the kid said, eyeing the cave. "I've seen this on TV, so like, is this where you brew potions or whatever?" "Potion. Yes, it's a bit spooky, but smells like Jim's socks." Grubble's eye twitched. "And your name is, besides Tiny Menace, Allen Key." Kron shot the wizard a look. Grubble rubbed his chin. "Well, the keys of Zag are magical, could be metaphorical. So we're stuck with him." "'Fraid so." "But I don't know anything about kids," Kron wailed. "They're basically drunk adults with less balance," Grubble muttered. "Give 'em juice boxes and video games, not rocket science. Don't touch that. They like action figures." "Full Avengers collection, thanks," Allen said, poking a jar of something that gurgled at him. "Also, ever heard of a mop?" Kron crossed his arms. "I'm done. Got concussed, dragon chased, turned into a popsicle and nearly eaten. Consider this my resignation." "What now, huh?" Grubble smirked. "Just one word." "Oh yeah, Spanfruit." Kron disappeared along with Allen. The wizard blinked. Guess I've still got it." Then poof, Kron reappeared, looking even more done with life. Kron blinked in disbelief as he took in his surroundings. No angry mobs, no stormy skies, just peaceful woods bathed in golden sunlight, birds chirping overhead. It was almost unsettling. Then, of course, Allen materialized a few feet away, grinning like this was just another Tuesday. "You deal with this kind of nonsense often?" Allen asked. "More than I'd like," Kron muttered, rubbing his temples. From the hilltop, the valley below sprawled with colorful tents circling a drab stone castle swarming with people. "Guess we should check it out," Kron sighed. "But I need a sword, left mine in that dragon thing." "Lorry," Allen corrected. "Right, dragon lorry," Kron grumbled. "Let's move." The valley buzzed with a medieval carnival. Games like Toss the Troll and Dunk the Witch splashed across the moat, all painfully dull compared to the future's glowing screens. But at the heart of it all stood a massive red tent, and in front of it the real spectacle, a sword wedged in a stone. The inscription carved into the rock promised the winner a vacation to Spain, castle keys, fancy windows, and most importantly, a plush toy. Kron squinted. "What's double glazing?" "Extra panes in your windows," Allen said. Kron frowned. "And what's glass?" Nearby, burly men strained to yank the sword free, failing spectacularly. A wizard in a ridiculous hat shoved a clipboard at Kron. "Care to try, lad? 5 gold pieces for fame, fortune, and a cuddly companion." "What kind of toy are we talking?" Kron asked, eyeing the sword. "It looked sturdy, worth the gamble if the prize was decent." 3 attempts, the wizard chirped. Allen rolled his eyes. Total scam. He wandered off, muttering about the lack of arcades and how rain always ruined everything. Meanwhile, Kron was ushered forward by a woman in sparkly leggings, the crowd buzzing. The wizard bellowed through a megaphone. "Next up, Kron the Barbarian." Inside the tent, a group of wizards spied through a peephole. "He's got the muscles of a confused ox," one snickered. Beside them, a massive lever labeled Sword Release jutted from the ground. "Let's see if he's worth it," the shortest wizard said. Kron cracked his knuckles, gripped the hilt, and pulled with all his might. The audience held its breath as Kron strained against the sword lodged in the stone, his muscles trembling with effort. The blade hummed faintly, and sweat dripped from his brow. "Better luck next time," the elderly wizard called out with forced cheer. "Third time's the charm, right?" Allen slipped unnoticed into the tent, ducking behind a wooden crate as the trio of robed figures watched Kron struggle. "All brawn, no brains," muttered one, adjusting his spectacles. "Honestly, if he manages it, we'll have ourselves a puppet king, easy to control, easy to profit from." The shortest wizard scratched his beard skeptically. He's got that stubborn look, though. Remember Merlin's mess? Thought he had it made, then the kid starts splurging on fancy furniture and noble quests. On stage, the announcer cleared his throat. Second attempt, no luck yet. Let's give him one more shot, folks. The crowd clapped half-heartedly as Kron wiped his palms on his tunic and seized the hilt again. Alan's fingers twitched. This whole thing stank of a scam. Before anyone could stop him, he yanked the hidden lever. Gasps erupted outside as the sword shifted slightly. The wizards whirled, shouting curses, and all three lunged for the mechanism, tangling in their robes. Alan darted away, but not before one clipped him on the ear. The sword sank back into place. Cheaters. Alan bolted from the tent, sprinting toward the stone with two wizards hot on his heels. Kron, it's rigged. They're controlling it. The lead wizard tried to cut in, but Kron yanked his hat down over his face. With a roar, he heaved the sword upward. This time, the ground itself tore apart. Chunks of turf flew, gears and pulleys shot into the sky, and the stone exploded, revealing a mess of magnets beneath. Kron brandished the freed blade, glaring at the cowering wizards. All right, where's my prize? Alan crossed his arms, and the key handed over. The smallest wizard reluctantly passed him a heavy iron key. And the stuffed dragon, Kron growled. And that luxury vacation, oh, and upgraded windows for my hut. He swung the sword for emphasis. Alan grabbed his arm. Maybe let's not push it. Magic or not, the wizards were recovering fast and their scowls promised trouble. Right on cue, the eldest ripped off his hat, hurled a fireball, and thanks to Alan's well-timed kick, Kron barely dodged in time. A sudden rush of air cut through the chaos as a battered broomstick wobbled to a stop beside them, Grubble clinging to it like a squirrel on a power line. Hop on, he barked. This thing's got the stability of a drunk flamingo. Kron crossed his arms. I won this fair and square. I deserve my prize. Grubble rolled his eyes. Yeah, and you'll deserve a pair of webbed feet if you stick around. That's some serious magic heading our way. With a grumble, Kron finally leaped on, Alan barely gripping the frayed bristles. Miraculously, given it was one of Grubble's notoriously shoddy brooms, it didn't splinter into kindling. Instead, it lurched forward like a shopping cart with a busted wheel, skimming the ground as fireballs exploded behind them. Market stalls flipped, people dove for cover, and somehow the overloaded broom managed to lurch upward. 5 keys, Grubble crowed, grinning like a man who just won a rigged carnival game. Brace yourselves, this ride's about to get wild. A burst of neon light swallowed them whole, and suddenly they were hurtling through a tunnel of swirling colors that looked like a disco gone rogue. So, where exactly are we headed? Kron shouted over the wind. Grubble didn't turn. Let's call it an educated gamble. You mean you don't know? Kron's voice cracked. We're zooming through this psychedelic nightmare and you're just winging it. Special effects are top-notch, though, Alan chimed in, squinting at the flashing lights. Grubble sighed. Look, I've got a general idea, like guessing which exit leads to the highway after missing your turn. Kron's fingers twitched like he was imagining strangling someone. You're lucky your magic's the only thing keeping us airborne. Exactly. So unless you want to try steering this thing, no. Then pipe down. The tunnel spat them out over a vast desert where the only landmark was a massive, crumbling pyramid below. Behold the Great Pyramid of Zag, Grubble announced, dipping lower like a tourist pointing out a roadside attraction. One of the 9 mildly impressive wonders of the world. What were the other 8? Alan asked. A bridge, a garden, some rocks, nothing worth writing home about. Grubble wobbled the broomstick. Now hang on, landing's gonna be experimental. Ever flown one of these before, kid? Alan gulped. Nope, perfect, me neither. They hit the sand with a thud that sent up a cloud of dust. Stuck the landing, Grubble declared, as if grading his own performance. Kron spat out a mouthful of sand while the pyramid loomed ahead, its ancient door rusted shut except for a single keyhole. Grubble cleared his throat. Well, here's the keys, you've got the kid. I'll just, guard the exit. You know, tactical support. Kron yanked him by the collar. Nice try, you're coming inside for tactical support. Alan frowned at the pyramid. What's even in there? Legend says it's the most valuable treasure in existence, Grubble said, pulling a crumbling book from his robe. Here, read it yourself if you don't believe me. Alan cracked open the brittle pages, squinting at the faded text. Somewhere in the distance, a vulture cackled. Or maybe it was just Grubble laughing nervously. The ancient book was covered in intricate symbols rather than words. Grubble the wizard traced his fingers across a page, squinting at the strange illustrations. Okay, so we've got a house, what looks like a boat, a giraffe, an upside-down rabbit, 2 crescent moons, and some kind of wobbly circle with a hole in it, Alan muttered. What's the point? Grubble grinned. Ah, but this is hiero, wait, hieroglyphics. Ancient picture language, it says, the great Zag declares, my pyramid holds countless riches, but the true treasures of the universe lie within. No joke, I'm dead serious. Pretty wild, right? Kron rolled his eyes. Enough talk. Open the door already, let's grab this so-called treasure. The first key clicked, and after some grunting, Kron forced the heavy door open. A dusty corridor stretched ahead. 2 more doors stood in their path, each unlocked with eerie ease. No rolling boulders, no spiked traps, not even a single poisoned dart, just silence. The next door had more symbols carved above the lock. Small rabbit, twisty line, bent tree, a duck wearing a hat, 2 horses on a weird bicycle. Grubble cleared his throat. That translates to secret treasures this way, Kron groaned. Oh great. When word gets out about this, I'll never live it down. The 4th door creaked open under Grubble's shaky hands, revealing a vast stone chamber. The walls were plastered with more cryptic symbols, and in the center, atop a raised platform, lay treasure, Grubble gasped. He lunged forward, rummaging through sacks and chests. Then a voice echoed from nowhere in particular. Will you take what's here and leave, or seek the universe's greatest treasures? Kron spun around. Who said that? Not me, Alan said, backing away. But maybe we should go. Grubble stuffed his pockets with glittering gems. If this is pocket change, we want the real prize. The door slammed shut, a heavy final thud that made their stomachs drop, especially since the key was now stuck on the other side. Then came the laughter, deep, booming, and everywhere at once. If you want the universe's greatest treasures, better start searching. Oh, and heads up, the ceiling's coming down. Alan's eyes darted around. There's always a secret door. Always. He and Grubble began frantically pounding the walls. Kron, meanwhile, was too busy holding up the descending ceiling with his bare hands, his knees buckling under the weight. No secret door, Grubble wailed. We're done for. Try a spell, Alan snapped. Kron gritted his teeth. Hurry up, I can't hold this forever. I did, nothing's working. Then crack, Kron vanished. The others scrambled to where he'd been, now just inches from the crushing ceiling, and peered down into a dark tunnel below. Grubble huffed. You were standing on it this whole time. Hey, help us down here, Kron called, leading the way through the dim corridor while the wizard struggled to keep up, weighed down by all the loot crammed into his boots, hat, and pockets. Without warning, Kron froze, eyes locked on the floor. He snatched a gold bar from Grubble and hurled it onto a slab ahead, just in time for a set of rusted blades to spring from the walls. Real charming guy, this Zag, Kron muttered, snapping the blades with a few well-placed kicks. Let's move. Alan grabbed Kron's belt, his voice tense. If I were Zag, I'd set another trap right here. People would let their guard down. Smart, Kron admitted, swiping another bar from the wizard and dropping it onto the next stone. A volley of ancient spears crashed from the ceiling, shattering on impact. This guy had way too much free time, Kron grumbled, eyeing the wreckage. Grubble whimpered, we still have to find the most valuable things in the universe. Stop tossing his words cut off as the slab beneath him tilted violently. A scream, then a distant splash. You know how to swim? Kron asked Alan casually. Got my grade 3 badge. What's that mean? It means yes. They leaped in after the wizard, plunging into icy water. Kron surfaced moments later, dragging a half-drowned Grubble. All that treasure in his pockets, he sank like an anchor, Kron muttered. See a way out. I just bit an alligator, and I think it went to call reinforcements. Alan spotted slick steps leading to a narrow ledge. They hauled themselves up, dripping and miserable, as jewels spilled from Grubble's soaked robes, most vanishing into the water. The tunnel ahead was pitch black, sloping upward. Kron shook the wizard upside down like a stubborn ketchup bottle before they trudged onward, lost, soaked, and thoroughly annoyed. The path leveled, then dipped again. Kron hacked through thick cobwebs while Grubble groaned awake, griping about the missing treasure they dumped to lighten their load. Still no sign of Zag's precious treasure, he whined. Probably solid gold. Wait, what's that noise? A deep rumble echoed through the tunnel. Squinting through the gloom, they spotted a massive stone ball barreling toward them, filling the passage entirely. Seriously, this again? Kron sighed. Time to run. Dead end, Alan said flatly as the ball closed in. Grubble, they shouted in unison. Do something magical, the wizard gulped. I'm still warming up, he jabbed a finger. Green light flared, followed by a deafening explosion. Dust choked the air, then sunlight streamed through a new hole in the ceiling. The boulder gone, Grubble coughed. See, told you I had it under control. Kron rolled his eyes. Next time, maybe before we're about to be flattened. Kron's voice echoed through the ruins as he urged the others forward. Let's go, we can scale this rubble. Within minutes, they emerged onto the open desert, the pyramid now a distant silhouette against the horizon. Kron stretched his arms wide, inhaling deeply. Sunlight, freedom, and fresh air, now that's real treasure. His grin faltered as his gaze locked onto Grubble, who shrank back. The most valuable things in the universe, Kron snapped. That's what Zag meant. And you threw it all away for a lungful of desert wind, you absolute slug. Alan wrinkled his nose, unbothered. Still worth it. Grubble ducked behind the boy, nodding frantically. Better than suffocating in those tunnels, right? Besides, Alan added, digging into his pocket, we didn't come out empty-handed. He pulled out 4 glittering diamonds, each the size of a walnut. As the trio trudged across the sand, their bickering faded into the distance. Grubble's voice the last thing audible. Fair's fair, lads, 2 for you too, and 2 for me naturally. The hunt for the keys, or sometimes wrong, leads to right by Pat and Jan Harkin, living near Boston Spa. Home to the British Library's newspaper archives, has its perks. Colin Smythe, a longtime collaborator, often asks us to track down Sir Terry's early journalism, whether in local papers or trade magazines. In early 2022, a fan reached out to Colin about a serial called The Hunt for the Keys, a story they'd clipped from newspapers as a child and preserved on their walls. To Colin's surprise, he had no record of its publication. The clippings, though meticulously saved, had been trimmed, stripping away dates and newspaper names. Only a vague note suggested it was 50 years old. Colin enlisted our help, and we headed to the archive. The mystery deepened. The serial mentioned Morpork, a city later reimagined as Ankh-Morpork in The Color of Magic, 1983. Logic said Sir Terry wouldn't reuse the name post-publication, so we narrowed the window to 1972-1984. We combed through 4 papers, the Western Daily Press, the Bucks Free Press, the Midweek Free Press, and the Bath and West Evening Chronicle. Starting in 1972, a shot in the dark. But as it turned out, the worst strategy led to the best discovery. We over-researched, determined not to miss a thing. In the Western Daily Press, Sir Terry's stories ran in the Sunshine Club section, alongside other authors. We logged every byline, title, and date, cross-referencing as we went. By evening, we pooled our notes, and that's when the real magic happened. Sometimes being wrong is exactly how you stumble onto something extraordinary. In early February 2022, Jan showed me a list that mentioned 2 peculiar titles: The Blackberry Thing, and Blackberry Weather, with an odd spelling of blackberry. That immediately caught my attention because Sir Terry often set his children's tales in a place called Blackberry. But the credited author was Patrick Kearns, not him. Curious, I dug into the chapters and found Blackberry Weather took place in a tiny Gritshire market town by the same name. After combing through our catalog, we uncovered 5 more stories under Kearns' name. We snapped photos and sent them to Colin, who confirmed our hunch. These were undiscovered works by Sir Terry himself. He even pointed out another clue. Kearns was Sir Terry's mother's maiden name. Talk about a family signature. Over the next few weeks, we stumbled upon a few more Kearns stories but hit a dead end with other pen names. By mid-March, we still hadn't tracked down the quest for the keys, but we did strike gold elsewhere. Turns out one of Sir Terry's stories, Mr. Brown's Holiday Accident, written under his known alias Uncle Jim, had been serialized in the Buck's Free Press back in May 1970. The kicker: the final installment, set for May 29, never made it to print due to a strike. The British Newspaper Archive even had a scribbled note on the June 6 issue. May 29th NP, no paper. Colin had parts 1 through 4, but the ending was considered lost forever. Here's where luck played its part. The Buck's Free Press didn't title their stories, so we relied on Colin's website for reference. One night, while updating the records, I noticed something wild. The issue on my screen matched the lost one. Same date, same paper, same Mr. Brown. A quick message to Colin and bingo, we'd found it. Turns out, the May 29 edition wasn't sold. It was bundled with the midweek Free Press. Small but mighty, this discovery held a plot twist Sir Terry reused in Mort decades later. Eventually, we unearthed the quest for the keys in the Western Daily Press, serialized in 36 parts daily at first, then weekly. It even had a contest, sadly missing from the clippings. Shout out to the winners. Hope those tents were cozy. Our team made 16 trips to Boston Spa, logging 60 grueling hours flipping through massive newspaper volumes. If only we'd started from 1984's end, we'd have saved ourselves a headache. But hey, where's the fun in efficiency? Looking back, we might have stumbled upon the quest for the keys right away, maybe even within the first week. But then we'd have missed out on Patrick Kearns' brilliant stories, and Mr. Brown's Holiday Accident would have stayed buried in the drafts forever. Funny how being wrong turned out to be the right call. A quick shout out to Colin Smythe and Pat and Jan Harkin for digging up these gems. Every tale here first appeared in the Western Daily Press, some under Terry's real name, others under the pen name Patrick Kearns or Buck's Free Press's cheeky Uncle Jim. Take how it all began, debuting in June 1971 under Kearns' alias, or The Fossil Beach, a serialized adventure from May 1973. Then there's The Real Wild West, February 1972, a rowdy romp, and How Scrooge Saw the Spectral Light, a holiday twist from 1975. Ever heard of A Partridge in a Post Box? Christmas 1970 delivered that one. Or The New Father Christmas 1972, where St. Nick gets a modern makeover. And who could forget the great blackberry pie? First baked in 1967 as Uncle Jim, then rebaked for Father Christmas's fake beard in 2017. Then there's Dragon Quest, revamped from 1966's Dragons at Crumbling Castle, and The Gnomes from Home, a quirky August 1971 serial. Each story's a time capsule, proving some ideas only get better with age. Oh, and between you and me, hunting down these old prints felt like a treasure hunt, dusty archives, cryptic bylines, and one stubborn librarian who swore Kearns was a recluse. Turns out, the best stories hide in plain sight. From the Horse's Mouth, originally serialized in the Western Daily Press in 1972 under the pen name Patrick Kearns, This story is a reworked version of Terry Pratchett's earlier tale, John, the Talking Horse, which first appeared in the Buck's Free Press under the pseudonym Uncle Jim. Later, it found new life in the deluxe editions of The Witch's Vacuum Cleaner and Other Stories, 2016, and The Time-Traveling Caveman and Other Stories, 2020. Blackberry Weather debuting in the Western Daily Press in 1972, this quirky tale was also credited to Patrick Kearns. Meanwhile, The Blackberry Jungle galloped into print in the Buck's Free Press the following year under Uncle Jim's name. Not to be outdone, The Haunted Steamroller rolled out in 1973, with Kearns once again at the helm. The Money Tree sprouting in the Western Daily Press in 1971, this whimsical story carried Kearns' signature. The same year, Pilgarlic Towers made its debut, blending humor and mystery in classic Pratchett fashion. The Blackberry Thing, this eerie little gem, first appeared in 1972, while Mr. Brown's Holiday Accident, a tale of misadventure, wrapped up in the Buck's Free Press midweek after a serialized run. The Quest for the Keys, a sprawling adventure, this one broke the mold by running under Terry's real name in 1984. The Western Daily Press even turned it into a treasure hunt, hiding clues in each installment. Because why just read when you can solve puzzles too? All interior illustrations were crafted by Andrew Davidson, adding visual charm to these imaginative tales. About the author Sir Terry Pratchett, the genius behind the beloved Discworld series, penned over 50 books that sold more than 100 million copies worldwide. From The Color of Magic in 1983 to his final works, his stories leaped from page to stage and screen, earning him accolades like the Carnegie Medal and a knighthood, though he joked that his greatest literary contribution was not writing certain books. Also by Terry Pratchett, the Discworld Registered series includes classics like the light fantastic Morpork, and many more, each brimming with wit, wisdom, and weird magic. The works of Terry Pratchett span a vast and imaginative universe, from the beloved Discworld series to standalone novels and collaborations. Among his most iconic titles are Moving Pictures, Reaper Man, and Witches Abroad, each brimming with wit and satire. The Discworld saga continues with Small Gods, Lords and Ladies and Men at Arms, blending fantasy with sharp social commentary. Later entries like Soul Music, Interesting Times, and Masquerade showcase his signature humor, while Feet of Clay, Hogfather, and Jingo delve into deeper themes with a light-hearted touch. Younger readers aren't left out, with gems like The Amazing Morris and His Educated Rodents, and The Wee Free Men offering adventure with a dash of mischief. The series evolves with Night Watch, Monstrous Regiment, and Going Postal, where political intrigue meets absurdity. For those craving more, companion books like The Science of Discworld and Turtle Recall provide deeper dives into the lore, while Nanny Ogg's Cookbook and Mrs. Bradshaw's Handbook add whimsical, in-world flavor. Beyond Discworld, Pratchett's collaborations shine. Good Omens with Neil Gaiman is a cult favorite, and the Long Earth series with Stephen Baxter explores alternate realities. His young adult works like Nation and Dodger prove his storytelling transcends age. Every book carries Pratchett's unmistakable voice, clever, irreverent, and endlessly inventive. Whether you're exploring Ankh-Morpork streets or unraveling cosmic mysteries, his worlds remain timeless. Note: this version removes redundant formatting, consolidates lists into fluid prose, and enhances readability while preserving all original titles and details. This digital edition is protected by international copyright laws, granting you limited access to view the text on screen. No printing, sharing, or reverse engineering allowed without HarperCollins' express permission. The striking cover art was crafted by Michaela Alcaino, while Andrew Davidson handled all interior illustrations. Originally hitting shelves in the UK through Doubleday, this US edition dropped in October 2023. ISBNs. Digital 970-800-633-76212. Print 970-800-633-76199. HarperCollins operates worldwide, from their Sydney high-rise to Toronto's Bay Adelaide Centre, even a quirky office in Noida, India, where the elevators play Bollywood hits. Their New Zealand branch overlooks Auckland's harbour, and let's be honest, who wouldn't want that view? Stateside, they're headquartered in New York City, just blocks from where Purple Santas, yes, that disastrous psychedelic band from the 70s, once played their infamous rooftop gig. Now about BlackBerry. This town runs on its own bizarre logic. The municipal clock froze at 3:10 p.m. in 1869, so naturally, all meetings and parades still happen at that exact time. Their crest features a duck, no explanation, just vibes. Legend says King Griddlebone, the Good's less impressive son, once fled from a possessed quill pen during tax season. Meanwhile, over at the North Gritcher Gazette, established 1867, ads still cost what they did in 1923 because nobody bothered updating the rate cards. Oh, and that fossil beach. Let's just say Neil Gaiman's foreword hints it's where reality gets flexible. But you'll have to dive into the pages yourself to uncover why Scrooge started seeing ghosts. Spoiler: it wasn't the cheap whiskey. Note: any resemblance to actual ducks, stalled clocks, or failed pop bands is purely coincidental. The whimsical journey concludes with a return to humbug, setting the stage for a series of delightfully absurd tales. Among them, a search for a jolly, red-hatted figure, a partridge causing postal chaos, and a fresh twist on Father Christmas. BlackBerry's peculiar charm shines through in stories like The Great Blackberry Pie, and How Good King Wenceslas Went Pop for the DJ's Feast of Stephen, blending folklore with modern mischief. Adventures unfold with Dragon Quest and the Gnomes from Home, while The Haunted Steamroller and The Money Tree add a dash of the supernatural. The quirky Blackberry Thing and Mr. Brown's Holiday Accident keep the laughs coming, and Pilgarlic Towers teases with mystery. The meta-humor of The Quest for the Keys by Pat and Jan Harkin wraps up the collection with a playful wink. The book closes with acknowledgments, a glimpse into the author's world, and a list of other works by Terry Pratchett, ensuring readers leave with a smile and a craving for more. And no, there won't be any pie left after that feast.